Go live. Hello everyone, how are you all doing? So, here's the thing. Welcome to the Battle of Valparaíso. That is our discussion today. And first, before we get into this too much, and why has that suddenly lost focus on me? I have no idea why. The camera's been fine right up until now for ages. Oh, it's fine now. But now it decided to go weird. Before we get into this too much, and I'm going to issue two notes. One, if you are a massive fan of Captain David Porter and you fundamentally do not like British people discussing the War of 1812, I suggest you don't watch this video. Just leave your various angry comments and go away, because you're just not going to enjoy it, okay? You just don't. There are a very small minority of people out there who fit into that category. Please, don't waste your time. Just don't. Also, if you're one of those people, and there are literally 5 of you who seem to do this regularly, who watch a live and are upset that, unlike in the long patrols, the recorded videos, I interact with the chat and feel that interrupts the flow of things and don't like that, then please also look away. Wait for the long patrol to come out. I beg you. Mainly because every single time it seems to work your blood pressure up, and I don't want to give one of you a heart attack. You don't like a live. You don't like watching them. Maybe if you watched it live, you might enjoy it, but I don't know. You never seem to. You always seem to watch it well after the lives happened, and then leave this comment not liking me interacting with the chat and saying it upsets you, it disrupts the flow. Just do yourself a favour. Do your blood pressure a favour, and just don't watch this video. Okay? That's a humble request from me to you. With that said, let's pop out the chat so I can have it on the screen over here. Have it go live chat. Have this go... No, I want this to go to here. Thank you. And then I can say hello to everyone. Hello everyone. Hello Peter Dawson. Hello Knight6 everyone. Hello Michael Cooch. Hello John Shea. Hello Drakenred. Hello Steve Clarke. Hello Alzaski. Hello Michael Cooch. Now the competition's over. How's it looking? Honestly, if I'm honest, I have gone in, checked there's been several entries. I haven't counted them up yet because I've spent the day dealing with lawyers. And I still haven't got all the paperwork through on buying the house. I mean, seriously, please don't take this the wrong way. Buying houses in Britain is perfectly fine and sensible. But the sheer quantity of lawyers that you will find involved in your life when buying a house in Britain and selling your own house means that you will feel ever so slightly that you are, how do I put this, signing your life away. I mean, I signed about 20 documents today and I still haven't finished all the signings involved. It's going to go on the other side of Easter and then we'll be through, and hopefully we'll have got the required thing in place to maneuver to the next house, because our Medley hours is more complicated, and I won't get into too much detail because of the bridging loan system we're having to do, because of the sheer quantity of allergies my mum and sister have to building materials, so we can't, it's cheaper to do it by bridging loan than it is to sell this place, rent a place, and then move into another place after we've done all the work done up. It's cheaper to just have them living here, because everything's already set up for them here. But yeah, it's a lot of lawyers. It's a lot of lawyers, and they're all perfectly nice people. They really are very nice people. If anyone watching, very, very nice people. I just like to be able to do one thing to do the house without having to sign 6 different forms in quadruplet. No, Duke of Petchington barristers are are a legal specialist, but in this case it's lawyers. They're mainly solicitors, not barristers. Barristers are people who have approached the bar, and they are a specialist form of legal. They are a legal specialist that mainly comes to a case when you're presenting your case in court. Yeah. The lawyers are still alive. Hello, Panorama. Am I the only one with low audio? Oh, no. Jacob, each one has to be signed and witnessed. Don't, and it's just fun. It's fun. Anyway, hello Felix B, hello DG40, hello Michael Cooch, hello Sue Mitchell, hello Duke of Patchington, hello Steve Calvin Gasberg, hello Tanner Velka, hello Jacob, hello Malaga, hello Stephen Richards, hello Polaris Muslim. I have been following the New Jersey dry dock when I've been able to have a chance to do so. Hello Mark Harkness, hello Carlos Rodriguez. Take care, and I hope you will enjoy the live later, and the recorded video comes out not this Saturday, but next Saturday. So there will be another video as well. Right. Misheard some lyrics once. The lawyers have engaged the enemy. Audio is good for me. Okay. Hello, Michael S. Schnellberg. Hello. And no. The more fun one is my mother, who, because of her age, also has to have independent legal consultation to prove, as I said before, that she is, how do I put this, of self and fully capable of understanding. This has led to some very interesting conversations and discussions of exactly what she can do. Oh. Well, it's fun. Mum is well. Mum is looking forward to the move, looking forward to being in a bungalow. Because whilst it has an upstairs, it's only my annex bit which has an upstairs. My annex has stairs and has 2 bedrooms upstairs. The rest of the house is all on 1 floor, and Mum's looking forward to that because she's still waiting on the hip operation and all the other things which would need to be done prior to COVID, and then they were cancelled for COVID. Anyway. So. How is everyone? How is everyone doing? As said, we are live. So, again, point to anyone who's feeling that, I should be jumping straight into things. I will be jumping into things, but in lives I say hello to people. I wish I'd gotten any entry in this time. Too bad you can't make a book out of them. A stroll through the cherry trees, exploration of alternate histories. Honestly, me and Drac have a couple of plans of books between us. Me and Garius have a couple of plans of books between us. Me and Dan have a couple of plans of books between us, and we all have the idea of eventually turning competition entries into a book and working out how we're going to do that. So, not this time, but it might well happen in the future. It might well happen in the future. 410 years shouldn't it be 210 years ago? Yes, it should be 210 years ago. You are completely right. That was some very bad maths on my part. Or rather, very bad typing on my part. In my defense, I added that in earlier today. And, I might have been on the phone to a lawyer at the time. In my defense. Let's see if this changes it. It should do. It should do. Hello, Sending Penguins. Hello, Runon. Thank you for the spot, Raptor. So. Today is once again diving into the War of 1812. And, how do I put this? The War of 1812 is an interesting conflict. It really is. This battle we're going to be talking about today is... Okay. So I'm going to start off, and this is going to annoy some people, at least if they've watched this far, especially if they're of the David Porter is great and amazing line. This battle almost didn't need to be. This battle didn't need to be fought. And honestly, the other advantage I think I would say is this battle is mainly fought for the glory of David Porter, who, like Admiral Beatty, has an absolute obsession with how he's going to be pictured in the future. Now, yes, this is the Battle of HMS Phoebe. And HMS Phoebe and HMS Cherub are on one side. Essex and Essex Junior are on the other side. I still can't believe... Seriously. I can't... I have spent my day today and for about the odd days for the last month or so in preparation for this video, racking my brain trying to remember if any Navy has ever named something Essex, something Junior other than the US Navy. I cannot honestly think of it. If you can, please do. Please tell me. I would love to hear all about it. But I've honestly been racking my brain, and I can't think of it. I have no idea. Honestly, no idea. But I haven't been able to think of one at all, of where they've called it the Junior. Pretty much Renon. That is my mum's capabilities. It caused an interesting conversation. She was asked, so who is the Prime Minister of this year? And she went, well, my one is currently Rishi Sunak, but who's yours? Because you obviously need to don't know. I was thinking, please don't try and do a competency test. Please don't try and do one like that. Just talk with her, because she will literally ruin you. And she did. That poor lawyer. So far during this particular operation of this moving her house, my mother's current ranking is she has reduced more lawyers to tears than Arleigh Burt-class destroyers have shot down drones in the Red Sea area. I'm not sure which is running at a higher kill rate. Not many people treat reducing lawyers to tears as a sport. I love her dearly, but there is points where I go, you're just toying with them now. That's a bit cruel. Imagine a Warspite Junior. Yep. Do you imagine the battle can be summed up like this? Dave Potter, frigate will do it live. No, it really can't. it can be summed up as glory, lads! And the glory ends up with the British not doing a... One of his complaints about the battle, and I'll be getting into it, is that the British do that Hillier doesn't get to close range, doesn't close to range. And you sit there and go, well, that's because Hillier actually knows what you're armed with. And Hillier's not stupid. There is a reason I have titled this video the way I have. There is a reason it is titled as When Hunting for Glory Breaks on the Rocks of Solid Professionalism. Because that's literally what happens. Porter is going hunting for glory. Glory for America, glory for himself, most importantly. And glory for the administration. And he bumps into a very solid professional who just looks at his glory hunting and goes, I ain't playing that game. Maximus, just imagining how the War of 1812 would have gone if Brock and Tecumseh hadn't died during the war. It could have been very interesting. Jack Ray, hello Jack, thank you for the memberships. Matthew Meek, hello. Rob Dennett, hello. Wade Annett, hello. Paul Westwick and Nicole Ross, hello. Thank you. Your mother calls these rookie numbers. Yes, my mother does call it. She's I've just told the lawyers to stop it. I've just said, look, we've all agreed she's mentally compos mentis. Yes, she does walk with the aid of a walking stick currently, but there are reasons. She has apparently impact arthritis through quite a lot of her legs and lower body from taking apparently a large amount of unspecified, we are not sure exactly when, trauma to those areas. And so that's it. That's my mum. That's the reason she has severe arthritis in her knees and her things. And because she has trouble walking and walks with a stick, some people really do try and treat her like she's not all there. And they very quickly find she is very much all there. Very, very much all there. Anyway, let's get into tonight's discussion properly. I've seen Duke of Bedgington's memes. You're ruining this with membership. You know, these things happen. So, shameless book plug, as always. The composition is now over. The submissions are all in. I haven't actually checked and signed off on the submissions yet, so if one did sneak in today, I wouldn't realise it. I'm finally getting around to it properly, going through them tomorrow, because there are no lawyers working tomorrow, and hopefully I can work things. But, you know, I've also got fun that I did get asked by Drac if I could try not to upset too many Americans with tonight's video before he's boarded the plane back to the UK. For his own safety, as he's associated with me through shipshape. I promised him I would take it slow. But yes, the Porter ribbing is going to begin at some point, because he is so like BT. Hello, Nautic Wolf. And as always, I will be on Discord after this is over this evening. But I will also tell you that there are approximately 15 slides of content to go through today. So, the War of 1812. Okay, we could start off with the causes of this war and the various things that are claimed, but I think we can all agree that the War of 1812 has many, many causes. There are quite a lot of people in America who get behind the idea of sailors' rights, despite the fact that quite a lot of the sailors' impressment issue would have been solved, as I discussed before in other videos, by introducing some sort of, I don't know, passport or documentation which would back up sailors when they said they were now a citizen of the United States. Because it's very difficult when you're dealing with someone, and also there's the fact that the British don't really recognise citizenship when you've transferred it to other countries at this time period, but if there's documentation, it's far more easier for you to make it the case. When you're dealing as a British impressment officer, and you're dealing with a load of sailors who all speak the same as you, sound the same as you, or sound similar and speak similar to you, and look similar to you, and then they go, oh, no, one of them goes, oh, no, I'm an American. They're British, but I'm an American. You're going, are you? Can you prove it? I'm an American. Well, we need more than your word. You're kind of a valuable asset. You have skills. We want them. And it's even more fun once you include, of course, the fact that there's Canadians wandering around who have also similar accents. And one of the more interesting naval officers who actually does impressment is actually Canadian. And you know, it gets all sorts of fun. But let's be honest, impressment was not the issue which drove the Americans to war. Neither was the whole idea of free trade with your enemies, because the idea that they should make blockading of of enemies illegal, well, that's going to cause trouble for the Americans, isn't it? It would mean they wouldn't be able to blockade people if they wanted to for economic warfare. And what had they done to the Barbary pilots? They'd blockaded them. So the arguments they don't want blockades again, it's strangely self-serving. They wanted trade with France. They wanted trade with various colonies. And as I said before, there are also issues for Britain with America in terms of the trade with the colonies in the Caribbean and things like that. So there's all sorts of issues then. Knight 6831, no. We've moved a long way past then, so I'm not sure why that's even a question, but you've just been chat. Is the British non-recognition of American naturalization still a thing today? No. We're talking about events 210 years ago. We've moved on a little bit since then. We fought a few world wars alongside each other and done some other interesting things alongside each other. Now, the reality is, at the strategic level, in terms of the government, their thinking was, Britain's distracted by Napoleon. Napoleon's a massive threat. Napoleon will keep Britain busy. We can take Canada. If we take Canada, we'll unite all of North America under the flag. And the Canadians will welcome us anyway as liberators, because they won't want to be part of Britain. They won't want the British yoke. And we can have a glorious victory and expand and grow the United States of America and get all that territory. Two small issues with this. One, a large section of Canada was French, Quebecois, and they don't like anyone. Not even themselves, really, but they definitely don't like anyone. Two, the other large population of the Canadians were a large number of people who had mostly left America after they got independence because they didn't want to be part of America. So if that's your two large blocks of public, there might be a small problem going on here. Just a small problem with the idea they're going to greet you as liberators. Saying that, though, the War of 1812 does start out quite well from an American perspective. Yes, the land war is always toing and froing, and eventually in 1813 you have the, what's it called? The Battle of Chrysler's Farm, or Chrysler's Field, which is a very interesting battle from an American perspective. Bit more interesting from a British perspective, but there is a reason that by November 1813, the British have pretty much blockaded the American coast. Because it starts out in 1812, they are not, and I'm not going to be rude about the Americans by saying they're facing the C and the D team, although to an extent you can classify what the British ships out there as. But let's put it this way, if you're actively fighting a war against the French, who have a very large and capable fleet, and you're the British Admiralty, and you're mobilizing ships, where are you going to send your better officers? To where there's an active war zone, or to where there's not. It's the same as the Far East in World War II. We have an active war zone. Our better officers are going to go there. The officers who are more emotionally capable, or who have not already been hurt by war, etc., who can do the job far better, are going there. We're going to send professionals out to the Far East, or out in this case to the coast of America, but we're not sending a lot of them, and we're going to send a couple of good officers to keep an eye on things. There's Cochrane out there, but you pretty much know the primary of our good officers are going to be over here. But the trouble is, by 1813, A, the British have mobilised even more ships, and B, they need less and less in Europe. And so, by the end of 1813, you've got pretty much 100 frigates, plus sloops and brigs, and a whole load of third rates, and some other vessels as well of interesting capabilities, sitting off the coast of America. And you've got troops on their way. So this is the real thing for the Americans. Yes, they're winning in terms of some of the ship-to-ship engagements, but they can only win those as long as their really supersized frigates can achieve overwhelming dominance. And they can do that against the standard British frigate, because the standard British frigate is built for volume. Britain's ordering them in by the dozen, not 6. They're ordering a dozen of these, and a dozen of those, and a dozen of them, and a dozen of that, quite happily. So Britain's frigates are 18-pounder frigates built all day long to be the volume of numbers and be the presence. Because the British don't need the frigates to be big status vessels as well. They have ships of the line. They don't need a big, hulking, heavy frigate. They just don't. It's a wonderful ship. It's a glorious ship. And the British have a few Razés, etc., which sort of do reach that level. But honestly, the British don't need them. Because here's the problem. And this is the big problem the Americans find as the war goes on. And this was where they really start to show their skill as sailors, to keep away from the third rates. Because the moment those frigates, those big frigates, see a third rate, there is a big problem. The third rate comes with the high ground. It not just has the firepower to smash them, it is literally a deck higher than them. It can fire down into them. It can do plunging fire. It can clear their decks. Can wipe out their masts. They get into a fight with a third rate, they are gone. And there are bigger ships out there than third rates. And this is the real problem for the Americans. Now, here is the thing. In March 1813, that's when Essex starts heading south. And it's March 1814 when she's caught up with. So she has a year of wandering around. Now, there's already been a point putting in the thing of, Black Maximus, if Nelson hadn't died at Trafalgar, do you think he'd been deployed to America? No. You don't need someone like Nelson to go and fight Trafalgar. You need a strategic commander. If I remember correctly, Collingwood dies in 1810, so he's not available, and he would have been in the Mediterranean fleet anyway. Honestly, they've got Cochrane, and they've got some perfectly good commanders, but you're not going to get a big name like Nelson sent out there. You don't need him. Where's the American ships of the line? Where's the American battle fleet for Nelson to go and break? There isn't one. They've got a less powerful navy than the Danish had. This is the point. The Americans have some great individual ships, but as an aggregate navy, they don't match up. They just haven't invested it. It's not the Americans' fault, it's the American government fault. As we've often said on this channel, and has already been admitted, the worst enemy of the Americans, of the American Navy, is Congress. The second worst enemy of the American Navy is probably the presidents. And the third worst enemy of the US Navy is probably itself. Because Any one of those three things will happily undermine the US Navy. Jacob, I'll have to skip this call tonight. Have to hike 4 days during the Easter weekend. Good luck. Good luck with the hiking. I don't know, Canadian performing war crimes? No, say it ain't so. Oh, good lord. People like to think they started in World War One. No, the Canadians have been getting in for it for a while, honestly. There are all sorts of Geneva Conventions even before World War One. Jacob, wait, I can speak English at a passable level. Would that make me eligible to be persuaded to join our own? Or is that eating cheese? No, they would probably, in this period, if you spoke English with an English accent, that could well persuade them. But if you're Dutch, you might well have papers which allow you to go, I'm Dutch. Plus, you'd probably be entered as Dutch on the books. And that's the other thing. Sometimes the issues with the impressment were you're supposed to enter your nationality on the books when you join a ship, and sometimes those people who, if they did recover the books, they might have claimed to actually have been put British on the nationality on the books, but then they say they're American. Oh, I signed on British so I wouldn't get, I'd get better pay or something like that. Well, you can't have it both ways. If you put down in the books you're British, and this causes all sorts of fun. Sadly, there was no eagle screech out at sea. Sometimes good luck. Perhaps they aren't them, but good luck finding a yank that sounds like a Canuck nowadays. You want to set as a challenge? I can think of some. Harness. Another issue is that it turns out that militias are okay for local defense, but not the base of your national army. Oh yeah, there is. I could get into the whole fun of New Orleans in that there is one of the things I find funny is that quite a lot of the talk about New Orleans being a really easy fight and how the Americans gloriously defeat the British demeans them, because it's actually a really tough fight and they do really well, and the British do quite well as well. The British though have retreated, and they've got more troops coming up from the Caribbean and other places to form a second expedition. And that's the problem. Once the second expedition arrives, then the New Orleans forces would probably have been wiped out or forced to withdraw, because honestly, their entire logistics and infrastructure has been sapped by the first battle. That's one of the reasons why I find the whole discussion of New Orleans sometimes a little bit silly. Albazaski, what a situation with someone who's pressing to sabotage their ship? Some of them might have tried, but they tend to be watched by the rest of the crew. And also, again, I would like to say this, that some of the press people even are more interesting, because one of the Americans claimed both that he should be given all the given prize money for the ship, all the things that the options the ships participated in, and then when it came to being re-enrolled to another ship, that was when he decided to declare he was American and shouldn't have to go to another ship. So there are some interesting stories, there are some interesting bits of history, and if you want to read Andrew Lambert's books on the subject, it's really quite fun. And I've listened to his lectures on the subject and gone, oh, so you mean they were both? Oh, lovely. Hi, Shomak. Highness, United States Constitution and President, the original Panzer Chief. Yeah, to an extent they are. They really are. The heavy frigates are a good example of what... And that's also their big trouble, and that's the big trouble for this. We'll be getting into this whole operation, because For an extent, for this operation to go work, and remember, they're deploying a force south to attack whalers. And the thing is, how are those prizes going to get back to America? They're going to have to go through a lot of British waters, a lot of British patrolled waters, to get back to America, including their own blockades. The blockade of America that's going on by the British. It's just, it's a kind of, with Essex, you almost feel like she's being thrown away. Oh, good lord. Tim O'Neill, in a nicest way, Bomber Harris was not the originator of alternative history. There have been so many before him. And for starters, there's going to be Porter in this video, so yeah. So many before him have done alternative history. Basically, alternative history is what the rest of us should call, when I publish my report, and history will honestly fit what I say. And then you look at the actual history and go, no, it doesn't. It's one of the reasons why historians don't like the phrase, history, we are on the right side of history. No. No one who's ever used the phrase, we are on the right side of history, or we're going to be on the right side of history, has ever in the long term turned out to be on the right side of history. I mean, literally, look at the history of people declaring they're on the right side of history. That's usually your first warning sign they're not going to end up doing something good. Because if you think you can decide what history's going to write about you and what history's going to say of you, that's your first inkling that you might be heading down an authoritarian steps. Well, there's probably a few others before that, but actually your first really obvious one. Cool, Tim O'Neill. Sounds like you're having fun. My coach, I think saying the US Navy is its third worst enemy overlooks the contribution of defense contractors. Look, I would love to say the defense contractors come third, but honestly, they're about fourth, sometimes even fifth, because there's also the US Army, and to be fair, with the contractors, the US Navy tends to turn it into an equal opportunities fight. Any British admirals that would be good at raiding the American coast at the time? There's Cochrane already there. They don't need to send more. My master, did any American cities have defense that could withstand a squadron of second or first rates with frigates raiding the harbour? They had some defences. If the British had really wanted to push and send a full formation, if war had carried on longer and full squadrons of third rates and with first rates and etc. had started to turn up, which was what the Royal Navy was preparing for when the war ended, things could have gotten interesting. Jack Ray, I read about New Orleans. It was a messy affair. It was. And this is why I don't like it being simplified, because it really, to me, when you simplify things and make them sort of sound like an easy, quick win, you're demeaning the people who actually fought the battle on both sides. Because you make it look like the victors didn't have to do much to win, and you make it look like the losers were just chump change. Oh, Churchill was also there. Look, so many people have tried to rewrite history, it's fun. I've heard the passion for glory, genetic, as David Dixon Porter was reputed to have attempted to undermine his own adopted brother, David Farragut, in a quest for greater glory. There is so much genetics going on here. Now, exactly. Look, one of the really fun things to do at a certain point, and we've got to do this, is we've got to do a full wander round. Me and Drac have got to do a joint wander round of HMS Victory, because there's so much stuff we can do when it's a pair of us, or get a really good group. to get together there and just use, and who don't mind all being on camera, so we can show just how claustrophobic some of the spaces can get once you actually have a crew on there. People don't realise it when they're walking around with just the visitors to the museum, because it seems quite spacious and people are running through. Whereas if you had a big group, you soon realise, oh my lord, this is one of the reasons why they do those things. Even Warrior is interesting, and compared to Victory, she's positively palatial. I mean, Warrior is positively palatial compared to Matro's Victory. Right then, I'm going to introduce you to something. This is going to come in now, but it's going to make more sense as it goes on, because cartel ships. Now, at the beginning of the War of 1812, the Admiralty issues an order which basically goes, look, we love you all, but, and there is a big but here, we're not accepting cartel ships because we don't have any arrangements with the Americans, and we don't think it should be sensible. It's not sensible for us to do this. And to be fair, the Americans do some really strange things with their cartel ships. Yes, they're dropping off prisoners, but they also at one point tried to charge the agent. They basically send a captured ship, the Duke of Montrose. The Duke of Montrose, right? They send it in to Falmouth. To Falmouth with prisoners. And they want their agent to try and arrange its sale in Falmouth so the money can be sent to America. Alternatively, they want to be able to buy food in Falmouth and then return across the sea to America. I'm not sure why this didn't work, but basically cartel ships are often used for carrying communications, prisoners between belligerents. They're a good way of returning prisoners, especially people on their parole. You just send them back because you don't want to have to feed them. And that's something which they do quite a lot of, so they often use that. But cartel comes from the earlier meaning to form a treaty or an alliance or a negotiated agreement. And this is actually a picture of two ships operating under cartel rules, a Russian and a British boat, passing a sword back of an officer who died. Man, I've been on board Victory and could only stand up straight between the deck beams. Yep. There's all sorts of issues going on. I would say the US Navy was also undermined by presidents who had the ideas of, you know what, instead of having warships, let's have gunboats, which have a gun on a rowing boat that we can tow around with horses. And we can take it to where we need it to defend ourselves. And we forget that the whole thing is the proper size ship can sail in, and it's going to be bigger than those boats, and they're just going to fire down into it. And we're going to get absolutely snookered. But yeah, these are going to defend us. Hey, caramba. I can tell you now, okay? There are 3 groups of modern salesmen who all took lessons from the person who sold that to the president of America at the time. Because, let's be honest, that level of snake oil is worthy of modern IT salesmen. And believe me, I have heard some really interesting things from people who come to organizations like universities selling new IT systems. Really interesting claims. Modern defense sales personnel, especially when they're doing publishing, there is at least, let me put it this way, on Twitter, they will often be former military officer, now, you know, I do this advice and that and thing, and yeah, I work as a contract advisor for this defense corporation or this defense corporation, and every single time they're putting up symbols, I saw one today which said, this is the Puma IFV. Name a better infantry fighting vehicle. And I was mentally going, well, the CV-90. At which he went, oh, well, the CV-90's cheaper. That's advantage. I was like, no, it's easier to maintain. It's easier trained to use. It comes in more variants. You can adapt it to do all sorts of things. It's used in most rugged environments. It's brilliant. Yes, it's cheaper. No, it's not as armoured. No, it's not as survivable as the Puma. But let's be honest, you can actually afford to buy about 4 of them for the price of 2 Pumas. It makes life easier. And the third group, please don't take this the wrong way. Now, I'm not even going to include used car salesmen in this, and I'm so tempted to include them, but no. No. Travel agents. Because I have seen some of the things travel agents try and sell us. And I have looked at them. And then I have looked at the holiday. And I looked at a study recently which said the perfect length for a holiday is 8 days. And I went, that doesn't make sense. Because if day 8 is going to be damn most relaxed, I do not want to be heading back on day 8. Day 8 is my day for relaxing. I want at least day 9, which means I need to have got there for day 1, so that's at least 11 days from the get-go. And, 11 days, that's an awkward time period when you consider our weeks are multiples of 7. So, realistically, I want 14 days, don't I? But if you think about 8 days, you can. If you think 8 days, you can figure, oh, maybe I go on I fly out on a Saturday, fly back on a Sunday, and I get almost 8 days. Yeah. Cartel ship sounds like dope in a fiction novel. It does, it is, and it's something which is a really piece of interesting bit of history, and someday I will do more of a proper video on them. But cartel ships are pretty much early version of humanitarian aid and delivery, humanitarian ships, and it's an interesting thing of you convert a prize ship into a cartel ship, and you have it drop off the prisoners, and if you have proper relations with the country, they can let them go. One of the other problems for the Admiralty with America as a cartel ship is because the American government hadn't organized itself properly in terms of bureaucracy. They didn't actually have a process for organizing cartel ships. So there is actually a reason for the British not to do it, and every time the British do try and use a cartel ship with the Americans, it does go wrong. But the interesting thing is the British and Americans still use cartel ships, despite the Admiralty and despite the US government having no mechanism of dealing with them, and despite the the instructions of the Admiralty, because they have no mechanism for organizing them between the two nations. And they still try it because it's a local officer thing. CV90 breaks down less frequently than Puma, but that's not a high bar. 0 working from 18 in last exercise. You only had 0. You had 0 working. Last exercise I heard about with the Puma was it was -4 were working. They had to bring in some new extra ones to keep the exercise going, and even they broke down. Don't think we have the super tax anymore, Tim. Anyway, so what was the big problem for the Americans in the War of 1812 in terms of when they were going out around the world? Well, you see, the British have stations all over the place. They have ships all over the station, and naval officers are gossips. Okay? I'm going to restate this because I've covered this in Long Patrol, and I will cover this again. Naval officers are humongous gossips. They truly are. Naval officers will gossip anytime. Royal Navy ships are notorious for this, even amongst NATO. I once heard a joke from, I think it was a US Commodore? Or, no, it was an Italian Commodore to a US Commodore. And we were at a conference, and I was hearing from them sort of coming in. And one of them said, I think it was the Italian one said, because the American one said, are you free for a meeting? And the Italian one said, no, I'm so busy, I'm feeling like I'm a Royal Navy ship doing a port visit. And it was just a case of, that's so true. the Royal Navy has made a history of itself by being gossips. A, on ships people always gossip anyway, because they have nothing much more to do with their spare time. But B, when you go in again in port, the best best source of information you have are merchant captains, agents in the port, any traders, any local officials. So you want to have dinner with them. And so you have a habit of establishing reciprocal dinners of when you arrive. And so you have invite them to dinner. They invite you to dinner. Or next time you visit, they invite you to dinner. Or they throw a ball for you. And this means that the British have got this constant flow of information coming in. And add to that, one of the things that happens almost immediately with the War of 1812, and this is something which is less well known under sort of the scenario. When the War of 1812 happens, the Royal Navy goes immediately, hang on, what's the most valuable trade which goes near America? It's the specie trade, i.e. silver, coming out of Brazil. So the South American station, A, gets an officer sent out there who is a proficient, very capable officer. I'll be talking about in a second, and certainly not one you want to go and mess with. He's sent out with ships which you do not want to mess with. And they transfer the trade from being done in merchant hulls to being done in frigate hulls. Which means there are a lot of very good Royal Navy captains who earn a lot of money during the War of 1812. In fact, the War of 1812 makes a lot of Royal Navy captains who never see action very rich, thanks to being able to carry a lot of silver backwards and forwards back from South America. It made a lot of Royal Navy captains very happy. Honestly, there are about 8 captains who, if you were going to go for a secret society which had managed to organise the War of 1812, it's them. Because they're the only ones of the War of 1812 who come out richer, happier, and better off than they got into it. And those are the Royal Navy frigate captains who take over the specie trade. It's just... It's fun. It is fun, but they make a serious amount of money, being able to transport goods. And remember, they're empowered to transport goods. They're doing it, and they're doing it with the literal authority of the Admiralty and the government. Oh, hello, Frank Baumer. There is so much gossip going on. My good, wasn't the rule that if you carry specie, you earn 2% of its value? You earn 2% of the value of what was carried in the hull. You could earn 100% of the value of what you bought to carry on top of the hull. So whatever you carried on deck was yours. It was the same as merchant captain rules. What was in the hull, you earned 2% of the value of. What was on top of the deck was up to you and the crew. And a lot of the captains got very good crew by saying, well, if you club your money together, you get a share of this, of what we carry on top of the deck. So they had very skilled crews who got paid very happily and earned a lot of money. Oh, I was asking, I would have said the name of it, but honestly, I'm not getting into the whole fight. For Britain, it would be the CV-90, because let's be honest, we could actually deploy that around the world. And the namer is lovely, but you want to try and get those onto an aircraft and deploy them where you need them. They traded silver from South America, and they were taking it to the UK and other allied powers. And you have to remember, this was a time when you still needed silver to be able to trade with China, because it's prior to the Opium Wars. So you need to get silver from South America to trade it with China. So all the China trade carried out by the East India Company, etc. at this point, is financed through silver procured from South America. All that silver was being brought back to the UK by these frigates. There are a few captains who are equivalent of John Paul Jones, honestly, for the Royal Navy this time. But there is also the fact that quite a lot of them are being promoted and around, and that's the other thing you find. Often they are slightly more senior. If you want to an equivalent of Cochrane, you want a equivalent of John Paul Jones, you probably want to look up Edward Pellew, who is probably the British equivalent of, and he is a really interesting person. But by this point, he is how to put this? He was a rear admiral in 1804. He was made commander in chief East Indies. He was out there between 1812 and 1811 to 1814. He's the commander in chief Mediterranean. So that's why he's doing that. And then in 1814, he's made Baron Exmouth of Conti, and then he's off to the he leads the Anglo-Dutch fleet against the Barbary States in 1816, and does the bombardment of Algiers. He's all sorts of things. So if you're looking for basically the British equivalents of Paul Jones, you're looking at Pellew. Jones is but here is the problem. Jones I actually have some respect for. I do consider a bit of a publicist, but he's actually good. Porter I have less respect for. Yeah, the Pellew family are good Cornish stock. So, the thing, and who was in charge of all this trade, earning the admiral's share? Well, that would be Rear Admiral Manly Dixon. Yeah, Manly Dixon. He's not an officer you want to cross. Okay, this is the sort of officer who you'd expect to be put in charge of a battle fleet and fighting somewhere like that at this point, because he's a very good officer. I mean, he's one of the few officers who comes out of Cartagena with a recommendation from Earl St. Vincent. Think about that. Cartagena. And Earl St. Vincent gives him a recommendation. That basically is anointing this man by God. We have been over this before, but Jervis, Admiral St. Vincent, is a bit, how do I put this? Is very difficult to impress. He's very difficult to get any recommendations from. The number of people he likes is probably fewer than the number of people that Admiral King of the US Navy in World War II likes. That is the kind of character. And this is someone who has an absolute wholehearted recommendation from St. Vincent as a fine officer. Think about that. St. Vincent called him a fine officer. No. Was Manly Power named after him? There is actually a General Manly Power wandering around this point as part of the war, and he's actually doing quite nasty things as well. And there's also Manly Power. Manly Power is back in down in sort of World War I, World War II era as well. I think comes from that same family. Manly used to be quite a common name in certain circles in the UK. Now, yeah, this is the thing is Manly Dixon is good. And Manly Dixon is the person who's receiving all the information at this point. He's in charge of the South America station. And he has, under his command, he has the Montague for most of the time, which is his 74-gun third-rate ship of the line, which for some reason the US Navy feels they want to avoid. I mean, there are literal instructions which go, avoid that ship. I can understand, you've got nothing that can fight it, but also, that's the Rear Admiral aboard, and the Captain aboard is not exactly much nicer to deal with. And then he's got a frigate, HMS Indefatigable. which is a Rasé frigate. 44 24-pounders. He also has 3 fifth rates. He 18-pounder frigates. He has about 3 sixth rates as well. He has some sloops. He has some other ships wandering around. And he has whichever of the spacey ships are coming in. Because he runs the system kind of like a convoy system. Okay? The spacey ships, the ships coming in for silver, come in empty. Or they come with some trade goods, some things to pay for the silver. But they come in quickly. And then when they leave port, they're escorted by one of his ships. So there's 2 ships. Until they're far enough out to sea, they are beyond where there should be anyone waiting for them. And then they sail off and his ships return to his areas. And yeah, he runs all that. He also keeps track of the information. Now, this is where Porter's self-promotion becomes a bit of a problem. Because what happens in the case here is that Dixon hears about everything that's going on. And when I say Dixon hears about everything that's going on, he gets multiple reports from multiple persons telling him exactly what Dixon is planning, thanks to the information being spread around Brazil, pretty much, and every other place. Where specifically the major reports come from Bon Citian and Neris, who both captains send up full packs of information, but he gets information from all over the place about what Constitution is doing, what the Hornet is doing, and what the Essex is doing. And he is coordinating fleets to deal with all of them. Now, he doesn't go chasing them down himself. This is the interesting thing here. Okay? He is a rear admiral. He is a man known for action. A man known for bravery, for personal leadership, who has impressed people with his ability to fight and fight hard. And yet his first instinct in his strategic command is not to go off chasing the ships himself. It's to send other people to chase them. He knows, for example, that the Essex is heading to James Hillier's area. So what he does is he waits till he sort of free of them and then sends 2 of his sloops, Cherub and Raccoon, to follow the Essex and to keep information going to James Hillier. So Hillier will know what's going on. This is the really interesting point, and there is a whole discussion. The Americans, some American historians put it down to a global intelligence network, and I've seen quite a few places have used this discussion, and of course I think it's, well, I remember from when I've been nicking the pictures from Wikipedia that it's one of the titles there as well. And as always, the pictures are used from Wikipedia because, as I discussed in the Becoming a YouTube Historian video the other day, copyright is a frigging nightmare. And you don't want to get into those fights. The amount of colleagues I have who get completely who are getting completely destroyed by the YouTube copyright protection, because it's done as an honor-based system, which is fine as long as the people involved are honorable, but a lot of the people involved are not, and that's causing trouble for everyone else. But leaving that to one side, it's not an information network. It's a command and control and information network. It's a full level system, and at every single level the commanders are empowered to operate on a strategic level and are encouraged to think on a strategic level. So you have captains and you have commodores and rear admirals and all these officers thinking on a level of, okay, this is the position which will give me glory, but this is the strategically sensible position to do, because my job here is not to go hunting down American surface raiders. My job is to secure the specie trade, to secure the silver trade. That is vital for the trade with China. That is vital for the empire as a whole. It's not my job to go and hunt down frigates. And let's be honest, if he did go and hunt down the Essex, there is no chance of the Essex versus the Montague. It wouldn't even be a fight. It would be a crumple. You know enough lawyers by now to do the copyright. None of them are copyright specialists. They're not that yet. I will find a copyright specialist at some point. We'll leave that to one side. So, these are good ships, but they're not going to do that job. And that's the big difference, as I said, is the strategic empowerment. The empowerment at all levels. It's one of those common threads through history. The armed forces which empower their personnel at all levels to think and encourage them at all levels to think on a strategic level and act with an eye to the strategy and to be rewarded for acting on a strategic level, even when it leads to less personnel glory, tends to win the wars. Now, at this point, I would like to be talking about the American command and control structure. But they don't have one. Why don't they have one? Because by the time Dixon is off doing his command duties and wandering around and sending out notifications about where Essex is going, Porter is a long way beyond being under any command and control structure. He was supposed to be partnered with Bainbridge, who was supposed to be on the USS Constitution. And Commodore Bainbridge was supposed to be in charge of him. But they never managed to meet up. It never happened. And, well, this made the situation even worse. The Americans don't have a command and control structure. They don't have an information structure. So, they are all fighting blind. So, if you consider the Graf Spee, when it's doing its job in the South Atlantic and it's wandering around and popping in the Indian Ocean, all those things, they're still getting information, they're still getting supplies. Porter doesn't have that. Porter doesn't have that. And so let's get on to Porter, because he is pretty much his own command structure. His own decision-making process. Now, his slogan that he liked to fight under was free trade and sailors' rights. As I've already been over, free trade doesn't really work in the context of we want to be able to trade with both sides in a war, take the trade backwards and forwards between them, and not worry about the blockade. Because for some reason, blockade is a major capability of naval powers that they like to impose and use. It's one of those scenarios of, you really want this as an idea because it's going to affect you in the future. It's a very short-sighted thing. And sailors' rights, again, I don't disagree with the concept. It's just actually implementing at a time without creating some sort of paperwork is friggin' impossible. It just is. The whole situation, again, I've discussed this in War of 1812. Neither government is acquitting themselves well in this scenario. Both are creating a situation which is ripe for war with their actions. Both are doing things which are going to antagonize the other, sometimes in response to what the other is doing as a tit-for-tat petty operation. Sending penguins. The US at the time was lacking a formal doctrine. So not only was he lacking tactical, also was a bit idiosyncratic. Yeah, there's all sorts of issues. Plus, there's the fact that he's armed with a ship which is armed with carronades, which he's perfectly happy with while he's winning. He loves the carronades while he's winning because it gives him such punch. When he loses, he doesn't like the carronades. But no, he lived from 1780 to 1843, so about 63 years. He was a midshipman in April 1798, a lieutenant in October 1799, a master commandant, not a master commander, commandant. He was in charge of a shore posting from April 1806 onwards. He's made a captain in 1812 and resigned in August 1826. He does have experience, you know. I'm not going to say he's not experienced, because he has. He has experience. He took part in the quasi-war with France. He saw action on the Constellation under the command of John Rogers against the insurgent. And he served as second in command of schooner Experiment during the action of the 1st of January 1800, in which he got shot in his arm, again in the quasi-war, and this was the quasi-war against France. And he was in charge of naval forces at New Orleans from 1808 to 1810. So he's got experience. But Essex is pretty much his first command. Essex is pretty much his first sole command. And he did do well, though. He captured Alert, HMS Alert, on for August the 13th, 1812, which was a victory. I'm trying to get the details I have for Alert sitting here. There you go. And, of course, she, though, had been a sloop, a very small ship. She was armed with 2 9-pounders, 16 18-pounder carronades. So she was really not a big ship for him to fight. And it carries on, really, as that. And in 1813, as said, he's sent to round the Cape Horn and cruise the Pacific to attack British whalers. Now, he again carries out the cartel process while he's doing that. And I'll get into all the ships he captures. But over his career, he does capture 12 whale ships and 360 prisoners. The trouble is that the reality of that doesn't match up with the claims of it in terms of value. His tactics for it was to try and erase British colours, and once invited aboard, he'd reveal his true allegiance and purpose, sort of style, to use that lovely phraseology that comes from so many books. So basically, he was acting more as a privateer than a naval captain in some regards. Because whilst you might use false flag to get close, the tradition is always that you raise your own flag once you're in combat range, and then you go, But he tended to wait till he was invited aboard. And he could do that because he sounded British. The crew sounded British enough they could get away with it. He spent quite a lot of his time between October and December 1813 resting, regrouping in the Marquess Islands, which he renamed the Madison Islands in honor of President James Madison. Didn't really work that well. They're usually grouped into French Polynesia, and no one really liked that one. And from that point onwards, then he eventually ends up in Valparaíso, and he's basically blockaded in there. We'll get into that, though, as time goes on. I will say it's not necessarily a good experience for him. Now, the British officer, his counterpart, is Commodore James Hillier, who will go on to become theoretically a rear admiral, maybe even more senior, depends on your argument. He remained officially in the Royal Navy till 1843 when he died, but he was active at sea in the 1830s, but he didn't do much in the 1840s. So there's a debate as to whether he was still active service when he died. Technically he was, but he wasn't. If you look at his service, you'll notice he begins his service the same year that Porter is born. So this is a small factor to remember. He'd literally been in the Royal Navy as long as Porter was alive. There is a wealth of experience under this officer's command. He'd taken part in the capture of Magicine during the American War of Independence. He'd taken part in the French Revolutionary Wars. He fought at glorious 1st of June. He'd been part of the invasion of Egypt. He'd been part of the invasion of the Ile-de-France, the Battle of Tamatave, and the invasion of Java. And in the War of 1812, he'd capture USS Essex. He was the son of a naval surgeon, James Hillier, and he was born at Portsmouth in Hampshire. He has a long history of service. He'd even served under Lord Hood aboard HMS Victory at the Siege of Toulon. This is an officer who has a lot of experience and a lot of capabilities. In 1813, he's appointed Commodore of the British Pacific Squadron, and he's ordered to operate in the Pacific Ocean to destroy the American whaling fleets, fur trading posts, and most importantly to also intercept any American surface raiders he should find. Now, it is Hillier who finds Porter. Porter doesn't realise Hillier's coming for him. This is, again, a failure of intelligence. Hillier knows what the Essex is armed with. He knows where the Essex is operating. He knows who's in charge of the Essex. He knows what the Essex has been up to. He has all this information at his disposal. Porter doesn't know a thing about Hillier. He really doesn't. You can see this in some of his actions. What did France do to annoy them? Basically, don't pick a fight with James Hillier. Just don't. He's a good officer. And yeah, this is a picture, by the way, is the Battle of Tamatave. And for those who've never heard of it, it's a really cool battle. It's actually fought on the 20th of May, 1811, and I might add it in at some point, because it's 3 frigates and a brig sloop versus 3 frigates. 3 British frigates and brig sloops versus 3 French frigates. And it's an interesting battle off the coast of Mauritius. Well, actually, no, off the coast of Madagascar. It's part of the Mauritius campaign. But, yeah. It's part of the Mauritius campaign, but it takes place off the coast of Madagascar, I think. I'm now looking up my notes on it. So he really has travelled the world. But let's start considering the ships, because there's the people involved, but there's also the ships. Now, we have the USS Essex. And she's a good-looking ship. She really is. She's built by Enos Briggs of Salem, Massachusetts, for a cost of $139,362, which was subscribed by the people of Salem and Essex County, to a design by James Hackett. Now, she was armed with carronades and was accepted in the US Navy by Captain Edward Preble. There is much discussion over whether she should have been armed with carronades or not, but let's be honest, it saves money. It provides her with a huge weight of firepower, and that was the point. It gives them a weight of firepower. And honestly, you're looking at it's a 40-gun ship. In every theory, you should be, well, 46 gunship, because you also got 6 12-pounders. You know, in pretty much in every theory, you should be talking about HMS Indefatigable having been sent to match up with her. She's equivalent to a 5th-rate frigate. And she's even been commanded by William Bainbridge himself, by James Barron, John Smith. Porter is her last commander. After this, she shifts into British service and becomes HMS Essex. Interesting to note that the Royal Navy immediately rearmed her with 26 18-pounder guns, 12 32-pounder carronades, and 2 9-pounder guns in the forecastle and 2 32-pounder carronades in the forecastle. 12 32-pounder carronades are on the quarterdeck. That sort of typical Royal Navy of, yeah, you had carronades on this ship. Yeah, we had 40 of them. That's nice for you. We don't like them. It's also part of the initial era, but the idea was that if you closed with your enemy and you fought them at close range, you know, the carronade does give you a huge firepower. If you consider a carronade, a 32-pounder carronade, versus an 18-pounder cannon, which sounds like a scarier weapon, the 32-pounder carronade. The fact that it's a lot shorter range, but if you're in close range, your poundage, your hitting power is far greater. So there are arguments for and against it. Now, her top speed was probably 11.4 knots. And that's if her hull's clean and everything's fine, which it wasn't necessarily, because how do I put this politely? Porter managed to quickly use up the supply of goodwill of the Chilean people in Valparaíso. Quickly managed to use up the supply of goodwill. Won't go into too much detail about how, but let's put it this way. Porter is the kind of guest who turns up on the first day and everyone thinks he's wonderful. By day 2, they're starting to think he talks a lot about himself. By day 3, everyone's heard the same 3 stories 10 times over. And by day 4, they're praying for him to leave, and then he starts becoming a complete and utter bore. And when I say that, by the way, it's not just the Chileans who said it. There was also quite a few Americans who said that about Porter as well. He's great in theory. Just don't spend too much time with him. He'll drive you insane. Now, HMS Phoebe, the large British frigate at the battle, is a 1795 launched frigate. Yes, she is made to, well, a modified Perseverance class design, put together by John Henslow, the surveyor of the Navy. The whole purpose was that she was supposed to be faster than the Perseverance class. And this is where the first point needs to come in, needs to really be considered. Her speed was 13 knots, and she probably was clean. Her top speed. A lot of discussion has been made of whether or not Porter could outrun Phoebe. He couldn't. 11.4 knots clean versus 13 knots clean. If he's dirty and she's clean in the hull, there's no chance he's got her getting away. And also, that's enough speed. And remember, I usually say 3 knots is roughly the advantage you need to be able to decide the distance of battle. Well, yeah, she's got she's got technically a 1.6 knot advantage, so that could be not enough. That's if both hulls are clean. With her hull being clean, his hull not being clean, her hull being clean and Essex's hull not being, that's probably a 3 knot advantage. Her armament, 26 18-pounders guns, 8 9-pounder guns, and 6 32-pounder carronades on the quarterdeck. Forecastle, 2 9-pounder guns, and 4 32-pounder gun carronades. So again, she's quite well armed. She's quite well armed. Complement, roughly 264. So Essex certainly has the advantage complement-wise, because in American service, she has roughly 350, if not slightly more. In British service, she'll have 315. But in American service, she usually has more, and she's carrying some prize crew as well. But they've also put some of them around. Phoebe is a good solid fifth rate. A pretty standard British fifth rate, but a slightly faster and slightly heavier one. So one of the larger frigates, one of the squadron leader frigates the Royal Navy has wandering around. Other vessel the Royal Navy has there at the battle, a Cormorant-class 18-gun sloop, the kind of vessels which should have been easy meat for American frigates. And, well, she has an interesting career as well. She'd been launched in 1806. She'd already participated in a couple of campaigns in the West Indies during the earlier part of Napoleonic Wars, and now this was a major engagement in the War of 1812. This meant her crews, in their full careers, some of them, who managed to stay with her throughout her commissioning, earned 3 Naval General Service Medals. So she'd served at Martinique, Guadeloupe, and well, the thing I find lovely is the awards are Cherub, 28th of March, 1814. She's got mostly a carronade armament again. It's a smaller ship, it makes sense. The Royal Navy don't like carronades, but they know for smaller ships, it makes sense to give her firepower. And she has 16 32-pounder carronades on the upper deck, 6 18-pounder carronades on the quarterdeck, and 2 6-pounder chase guns and 2 18-pounder carronades on the forecastle. She's a good little ship. She really is. Now, yeah. So, any questions so far on the ships before we get into a full analysis of them? Any questions? I'd also say that those are the stats for the standard Cormorant class gun sloop, and I think from memory Cherubs were different. In fact, I know from Cherubs were different because I remember entering them in the next file which comes up, so there's going to be a difference in the figures I give for Cherub next. But these are the standard what she was supposed to have been fitted with. Carronades can be lethal on the forecastle if you can get close enough. No, 18 guns means it's pierced for 18 guns. It doesn't mean it necessarily has 18 guns, Leslie Mitchell. You can be however many guns your hull's pierced for is what your rating is. If you can carry more guns on upper decks, etc., which fire over the railings, you have them. But your hull's not pierced for them. So often they will carry the guns they're pierced for will be the full heavy cannon, and then they might outmount carronades as extra. Was there anything stopping the frigates of the main time from carrying longer 32-pounder cannons, besides reduced number of guns? The sheer amount of crew it takes to crew them, the weights and forces they exert on the hull, and pretty much that's it. You know, the effect they have on the hull, especially when fired, but also the weight in terms of displacement. So that all has an impact on it, Blackman Maximus. considering where the questions are going, let's go to the next slide. So, for USS Essex Jr., you have some interesting various discussions about her as a vessel. And pretty much she was a French prize that a British whaling firm had purchased and used a whaler under the name Atlantic. In 1813, on her second whaling voyage, she's captured by the USS Essex off the Galapagos Islands. The Americans then renamed her Essex Jr., and she gets recaptured by the British on the 28th of March 1814, and she's then sent to New York as a cartel ship, where the Americans seized her and sold her. So yeah, she has an interesting history. What's even more funny is that after she arrived, she was actually condemned. They seized her and then they condemned her. She realized she had no value. So, as you can see, I've done a little bit of a... As I couldn't have a picture of Essex Jr., I decided to put in a slide here of this discussion of this. And I'm going to expand it out a bit wider, but you can see. Here is the point I'm going to make. Now, if you look at the cannon broadside weight in terms of long-range fire, and this is rough calculations based on the guns they could theoretically turn to broadside rather than the ones they might have turned to broadside if they'd done a bit more work. So, you have theoretically a broadside cannon broadside, sort of long range, sort of the long gun fire of 279 pounds for Phoebe, which, if you consider it, is a heavier broadside than all three other ships there combined. But if you consider the carronade broadside weight of Phoebe, it's 160 pounds. Of Cherub, it's 304 pounds. Of Essex Jr., it's 90 pounds. Which, if you add together, are all combined less than Essex's 640 pounds. Essex has the heavier broadside, but her broadside is shorter range. Guns by 1812 guns were flintlocks. Some were. But, you know, you're not... I don't think many of these ships here would have had that. I think there are flintlock cannon going around, but I don't think there are that many, if that makes sense. And I'm doing that from memory. I don't have my I just looked. I don't have my notes of flintlock cannon on here. I wasn't expecting that question this evening. Sorry, Carl. I should probably have thought I'd had that question. I should have had my notes ready to go on that one, but they're in another... This is why you shouldn't have too many notes as a historian. You start to reorganize them. So pretty much, here is the factors. If you get to close range with this ship, you are snookered in this battle. If you keep to long range, then this ship has the advantage. Heavily. Good luck, Tim and Neil. So Razes were ships that are... Yes, I've done a video about Razes, I think. But pretty much what they do is they take when they're Razing a ship, they remove a deck on a ship of the line and convert it into a frigate. So it has all the thick timbers of a ship of the line. So basically, you're fighting a ship of the line that's had a deck removed. So it's got all the hull strength of the ship of the line, which gives it a lot of hull rigidity and strength and ability to support weight. You give it those guns, and it tends to go and fight like the... You really don't want to fight... Basically... you could argue in many ways the Americans with their heavy frigates were trying to build something equivalent to a Razé. There is an argument whether they achieved the same effect as a Razé, because their timbers weren't quite ship-of-the-line timbers. They couldn't be, because they're being made as a frigate to make, so they need to be built lighter so they can flow through the water like that. Razés are kind of weird and special, but it makes sense, and that's why I did a whole video about them, I think I've done a video about Razés. If I haven't, I'll do a video about Razés at some point. Probably in the year of leadership. It makes more sense next year, because Razés would tend to be given very special leaders. It's kind of like tribal class destroyers. The Royal Navy tends to go, who's going to command a Razé? Ah, yeah, they'll do. Find the most aggressive, scary, dangerous officer we have. The one that's a barely controlled barbarian, but is controlled by a fine strategic brain, and let them loose. And see what happens next. Generally involves a lot of people going, we don't want to get involved in this. We don't want to get involved in this. Please don't make us get involved in this. Why? Look, we didn't want to get involved in this. We said we didn't. Now, the thing is, theoretically, the Essex and Phoebe are about equal. But let's be honest, the Essex has got a very short-range armament. And Pellew and Cochrane, I think, both got Razés in their time. I'm not sure if Cochrane had one for long. Actually, maybe he didn't. I know he was considered for Razé. I think he got one. Pellew did get Razés. Yeah. I think Sidney Smith got a Razé at one point, I think. At least under his command. Razé equals Razé equals battlecruiser. Heavy frigate equals panzer chief. Razé wins. Also, Essex looks like it compares to Constitution, as Wasp compares to Yorktown. Yeah, there is a trouble. Is that, you know, Essex thinks she's a Constitution. She's not a Constitution. And Porter very much thinks he is. But that's the problem. Now, this is the force which is set up for this battle. And as you can see, there's a slight difference. Cherub has got 8 12-pounders. 8 12-pounders. Whereas the stats I gave for her, the official stats were 6 18-pounder carronades. So what's happened? Why has she dropped that? Well, there's a whole discussion, but pretty much I think it comes down to her long-range operations. I think they decided they wanted to have more weight for other things, so they changed her guns over. Okay, the Royal Navy's procedure for selecting Razé and tribal captains was finding all the captains they wouldn't want to have to fight, and let them lose like the vicious attack dogs they were. There are many problems when a Royal Navy. That is just not a good scenario. Those ships are they are selected, and their crews are selected. Yeah, technically it's conversion by definition, but it's also It's also a major rebuild at the same time, so we have to consider what the British habit is with major rebuilds. Anyway, the blockade before the battle starts on the 3rd of February. And pretty much this happens when Phoebe and Cherub arrive outside Valparaíso. Hillier knew very well what was going on. Remember, he had a lot of information. Porter didn't even... The first time Porter realised what was happening was when they came into sight. At that point, Porter's worried. Hillier knows that British diplomatic support is far more useful, far more of value to Chilean government than American support. Let's be honest. Again, this is just like you're dealing with in World War II and World War I, when the Germans start appealing to the South American nations. And the South American nations go, we might have significant German populations. We might have significant feeling for you. But there is also the reality. The Royal Navy controls our trade. You do not. You cannot help us. They can surely hurt us. It's far better to be friends with the British. And therefore, he knew the Essex would not be able to stay long. In fact, almost as soon as he arrives, almost like it's arranged, a merchant vessel, the Emily, under the command of George O'Brien, sails out of Valparaíso to give full up-to-date intelligence to Hillier in Phoebe. There's also the fact that the British agent in Chile and another person who was assisting, Mr. Crompton and Andrew Bless, also passed on letters and information through the Emily. It's almost... I'm going to say this, it's almost like, unbeknown to him, Porter has found himself in a trap. I mean, he's gone into Valparaíso Harbour, this harbour which has this kind of narrowing entrance, and it's kind of interesting to try and get in and out of. And he's gone in willingly. And now the British ships are outside. And the British merchant ship immediately sails very quickly to give him all the information to the British Commodore in charge. At this point, Porter will like to argue that he had knowingly sailed into Valparaíso to hope to encounter the British. He wanted a duel of 2 ships versus 2 ships. If he really did, then frankly he's a bigger idiot than I think he is. On a strategic level. I think he's very smart in some ways, certainly in self-promotion and certainly in some of the ideas he pushes in terms of infrastructure and investment in navies, etc. I'm prepared to support him and agree with him. But in this scenario, you do not sail around the world looking for ships to fight a duel with. Especially not a Royal Navy ship, which is a squadron which is under the command of Commodore Hillier. That's just not what's going to happen. And of course now he found himself blockaded by the very 2 ships he'd hoped to engage. Theoretically. I don't think he'd gone to Valparaíso to hope to engage the British in a duel. I think he'd sailed in to try and get supplies. Remember, he had been encamped for most of the winter in places with limited access to supplies. He'd been doing the best he could with his ships, but he needed to go somewhere with a naval development to buy the things he needed to buy. He needed to buy food, he needed to replenish his stocks of various things. He needed it. Valparaíso is there are limited harbours at this point that a ship like his can go into and actually get the supplies it needs. You think when you hear urgent this time period, I think of rakes from the Empire War. Think more diplomats. Think more gentlemen, okay, than rakes. Okay, more gentlemen. Now, Hillier sailed into the harbour in Phoebe. Went very close to Essex. Now, technically, they're in a neutral harbour. You should not be fighting in a neutral harbour. That is one of the things. But Hillier notices that Essex is rigged to engage and grapple. And Hillier hauls off because Hillier's sailing in a neutral harbour. Probably because he wants to get the Chileans to impound the Essex. That he'd love. Hillier would love to win this battle without ever having to fire a shot. And my suspicion is he was going in to try and do the diplomacy. And there's also the fact that he was probably hoping that Porter would be a complete and utter and fire first and violate Chilean neutrality straight off the bat. But thankfully, for Porter's sake, he held his fire. Now, the one problem for Porter is that rigging the ship the way he had rigged meant he couldn't get Essex to sea while Phoebe was in port. In fact, Phoebe gets out first. And whilst Essex could have outrun Cherub and probably could have taken Cherub in a fight, Phoebe could outrun her. And if Phoebe's out waiting at sea, there's no chance of Essex getting past. They're both anchored in the bay, though, at this point. Realistically. Now, the very next day, Porter decides to hoist his ensign, which of course has the nice thing of free trade and sailors' rights to the top gallant masthead. At which point, Hillier has Phoebe hoist the St. George's ensign, written with God, country, and British sailors' best rights. Traitors offend both. Hillier really wasn't a wordsmith. He wasn't. I'm not going to try and claim he was. And then had his band play God Save the Queen. God Save the King, I mean. Sorry, it's force of habit. And had the crew rise up through the rigging and give 3 cheers. At this point, Porter decided to then take his crew through Valparaíso with flags of American slogans. Basically, both sides weren't really trying to influence each other. And this is the point, is people sometimes go, this was a psychological battle between the two sides. Honestly, they are more about trying to win the hearts and minds of the Chilean population than anything else. And it doesn't really matter for Hillier to try and win the hearts and minds of the Chilean population. He's won already. This is what Porter doesn't seem to quite get. And he keeps trying to overplay his hand and think he's going... It's kind of like, again, the American invasion of Canada. He thinks if he keeps trying, then everything will work out as it should do in his mind. And it doesn't. Because the Chileans know, if the British want to, they can destroy the Chilean economy. They can blockade every port and it won't even stretch them. The Americans can't come and help them. It's a load of, discussion, pretty much. There is also another idea that's designed to intimidate the opposing captains. That's put forward by some historians and some discussions. I don't really think so, because Hillier, I know, and I would like to point out, this is actually said at certain points as an idea raised by Andrew Lambert, but it's one of the points I disagree with him on. I think it's an idea that some have put forward, but let's consider Porter. Is he going to be intimidated? No, he doesn't understand he's beaten. He's made a huge strategic error, and instead of, well, he could have theoretically raced to get to sea, raced to put his ship back in sailing order and get out to sea. He could have theoretically done that after Phoebe comes into harbour, because Hillier wasn't going to fire first. That would cause issues for Britain elsewhere in the world. They can't do that. So calculation would have been Porter could have raced to sea, but Porter doesn't want to, and so Porter isn't going to take any notice, and Hillier, he's not going to take any notice. He's a professional who, at this rate, probably knows what Porter's getting for breakfast before Porter even gets it. I mean, I'm fairly certain the level of information Hillier is getting on Porter. At this point, he probably could be sending notes to Porter, advising on what clothes to wear that day, because what's cleanest from his laundry. It's quite disturbing, the level of information coming along. That's also why I find the whole thing of the God and country, British sailors' best rights, and traitors offend both. Hillier could have thought up something better as a slogan. But that's the trouble. He is a very good naval officer and fairly good at the strategic thinking, not so good at the slogan making. Anyway. They have a discussion, and Porter agrees to exchange the British prisoners aboard Essex for Hillier's American prisoners aboard Phoebe. Both ships are docked in Valparaíso, so it makes sense so. And Hillier gets further confirmation from British prisoners who've been aboard the Essex that the Essex is only armed with those short-range carronades. He'd already heard that from Dixon. He'd already heard that from other sources he'd been picking up in Chile. He'd heard that from the agents when he'd arrived, and he now gets this confirmed. So he really does know, with absolute certainty, and his own eyes, because he's gone wandering around looking, and going up rigging, looking at the American counterpart and gone, what are you armed with? Hillier to Porter, how's the corned beef? And Porter goes, I haven't even had my breakfast yet. What have I got? The thing is, though, Porter doesn't seem to make the same study of Hillier's ship. That's the really strange thing. They have ample information. Now, the one problem that Hillier was in fear of was that if Essex sortied, Phoebe and Cherub could be detained for 24 hours so as not to violate Chilean neutrality. So, they put to sea on the Valentine's Day on the 14th of February. Because Hillier had finished replenishing all his stores, his ships were all fully crewed and lovingly stored up, and they could move to just outside of range of the Chilean coastal batteries, which was at this point considered the end of territorial waters. Territorial waters at this point were considered out as far as the range of the batteries. And it's still in territorial waters consideration, so think about that. Cannon shot was the range of territorial waters. But they were close enough, they could still send boats into harbour to receive fresh beef, water, vegetables, and, of course, intelligence. Coach, so it's an information war, but only one side is fighting it. Only one side is even acknowledging existence, let alone fighting it. I mean, it's terrible. The British ate corned beef 5 days a week, theoretically, but actually at this point they're eating fresh beef. They're getting fresh beef from the Chileans, and all sorts of other things from the Chileans, so, Drac is perfectly right when he says that they eat the corned beef 5 days a week, but that's while they're on blockade and long patrols and duties. When they're close in port, they'll try and get a variety of food. So they might get pork, they might get chicken. There's all sorts of things they might get. Now, here is where Porter does another stupid thing. On the 25th of February, that's 11 days later, Porter had his prize vessel that he had in harbour with him, Hector, towed to sea and burnt in the outer harbour within the bay. This was within Chilean waters. Now, can anyone imagine what the reaction of the Chilean authorities was to Porter doing this? Anyone think they were happy? In fact, I'm going to make that a little poll, if I can. And let's start the poll. And while the poll's running, I'm going to refill my iron brew. Angry seems to be winning. Renan, that's a random question, but how did ships keep their liquid cash reserves up while in long deployments? They tended to carry specie themselves. They carried silver, gold, they carried all sorts of things. Also, the agents, if there was a British agent in the town, they would advance it sometimes to support a ship, and then they would get reimbursed from the UK. There are all sorts of options for how they could do it. I want something to snack on. Oh! Oh, and please note, Iron Brew, you still haven't taken the chance to sponsor me. But, yeah. This is a cool snack. I'm not sure how many countries have this, but pepperoni and cheese in a box. Basically, it's mine and Drac's heaven. It's all protein, no veg, no carbs. So, Ignots and bars like a mixture of things, but yes. The Phoebe could do 13 knots. The Essex to do 11.4 knots. So I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just wait for my hand to catch up with my voice. And the poll results are 89% angry, 10% happy. Those people in the 89% are very much correct. Yes. To be fair, the Chilean governor was so insulted and so angry, he sent personal dispatches to Hillier saying he would ignore the action if Essex would be taken in harbour. He gave full permission for Hillier to enter the harbour with Phoebe and Cherub and smash up the Essex in his harbour. We have Lunchables over here. They're not pepperoni stuff. despite this permission, despite this practically open carpet given by the Chilean governor, Hillier decided that violating neutrality in such a way would not serve British strategic interests. He decided that, frankly, there was no point to it. There was no advantage to it from the British perspective. On the 27th of February, Essex and Essex Junior tried to set sail. But Phoebe kept denying Porter the chance to close range. I can't think why. Why would Hillier in Phoebe not be allowing Porter to close range? In fact, at one point, Porter fired a signal gun to Essex Junior and tried to fire 2 shots at Phoebe in order to start a duel. Phoebe didn't close range. I can't think why she didn't. The American ships, Essex and of course Essex Junior, returned to port after this. At this point, Porter starts complaining that Hillier's violating neutrality to the Chileans. Now, for some reason, Porter complaining that that Hillier is violating neutrality wasn't washing with the Chileans. Can anyone think why the Chileans are not receptive to Porter claiming that it's the British violating Chilean neutrality at this point? Anyone at all receptive to it or working out? Any suggestions, please put them in the chat. Why do we think the Chilean governor, when Porter is accusing Hillier of violating neutrality, is looking at him as if he is an idiot? In fact... Oh wait, not this wall. In fact, it gets fun, but the point is, it gets worse. It gets worse because it gets to the point where he demands Hillier defend himself. And Hillier does. At this point, Hillier has to send a note. So he does. He points out that Porter's violating neutrality by burning Hector on the 25th of February, by firing 2 shots on Phoebe on the 27th of February, and by attempting to board Phoebe on the 12th of March. Now, the boarding plan, which was planned on the 12th of March, by the way. Here is the thing. Porter was planning to try and board Phoebe with 2 boats that would go out under the cover of darkness. Hillier received a boat from the governor telling him Porter was planning to do this. He received a boat from the British agents telling him he was going to do this. He received a boat from the president of the Chilean Merchant Association in the harbour that Porter was going to do this. He received a boat from a British merchant ship in the harbour that he was going to do this. He received more boats telling him Porter was going to try and attack him on the 12th of March than Porter was planning to send on the 12th of March. In fact, more boats were coming out to Hillier than Porter had. This is the reality of the situation. Porter has managed to muck up the situation in a neutral harbour so much that the governor is not even bothering to pretend to be neutral. He is sending a warning under the flag of his own flag on the boat, his own deputy out to warn Hillier what Porter's planning. And let's consider this. His ability to keep the information contained is so terrible, everyone knows what he's planning. It's just... no. Now, for all those who thinking it can't get more stupid, at this point it does. Porter writes an official note to Hillier himself and challenges him to a single ship duel. Yes, he challenges him. Now, think about this. There have been challenges issued. HMS Guerriere, James Dacres, had issued one to John Rogers aboard the USS President. Rogers declined. James Lawrence of the Hornet sent one to Burnaby Green of HMS Bonne Citoyenne. Again, was declined. Bainbridge of Constitution pledged not to intervene in that fight. But hey-ho. And, of course, Philip Broke of HMS Shannon sent one to James Lawrence in the USS Chesapeake. Lawrence actually accepted this. That is the sole battle in the entire War of 1812 where they actually agreed to a duel. They actually agreed to it. Usually, when they happen, they are not a result of challenges. Anyone guessing what Hillier's going to say? Do we think Hillier's going to accept this duel? Falenka, at one point there was quite a few complaints from Hillier. He was trying to eat his lunch. Yeah. Pretty much, Hillier said, nope. You know, it's a case of, no, I'm not. If you want to come out and fight me, come out and fight me. I'm not doing any funny duels with any funny weird rules. It's gonna be a fight. You want to come out and fight me, come fight me. But otherwise, you stay in harbour. I'm happy here. Now, you get Mark Anders. The sole accepted challenge duel goes bad for the accepting party. Yeah, this is. I'm not sure which period some of these people are in when they're issuing duels between ships, but you know, that's life. That's the fun of it. At this point, there are rumours. And these rumours are so accurate they actually never happen, but hey-ho. The thing is, the Americans have ideas of sending some of their super frigates, some, you know, Constellations, etc., to sortie from their ports and attempt to join Porter. Unfortunately, all the ships were blockaded by British squadrons which had at least one, if not two, or three 74 gunships aligning them. So, for some reason, none of the American big frigates were getting anywhere. I can't think why. Can anyone think why none of the big frigates are getting anywhere when they've got three third-rate ships of the line sitting outside going, hello! Hello! It's kind of like the F-22 in those videos. Oh, who's it? Who is it? The air defense, the F-22 going, I want some meat in my diet. There are... Oh, I'm trying to remember it. He's the air defense guy. I can't remember his title on Twitter. His title on YouTube. I cannot remember it. But no, it's kind of like that. There's each of those frigates sitting there going, so your idea is we go and reinforce Porter, and to just get to Porter, we have to get past those. You like us dead, then? You want us dead? There's like 3 of them sitting out there. And I mean, they're just sitting there. Looking quite big and mean. Yes, habitual line crosser. Exactly. That's what the third rates are doing. They're just sitting outside going, do you want to come play? No. No one wants to come play. But unfortunately, because of the risk of that, Dixon has already attached HMS Britain, another 18-pounder frigate, to come and support him. To come and support Hillier. Nereus and Targus were already on their way to support him, because it was felt he needed more frigates to back him up. And he was considering sending a third rate to support him. So this is the point. Dixon is sitting back going, okay, they might be sending support. Okay, before they even had a chance to send it, let's send our reinforcements. You pretty much stubborn. And the thing is, Targus and Nereus are also 18-pounder. They are like Phoebe. They are bigger 18-pounder frigates. And at this point, Porter actually hears about their arrival. We're not sure how he hears about their arrival, because the Americans really don't have much of an intelligence network. And the only one who really knows they're coming for shore is Hillier. So there is a very good chance the person who ensures that Porter hears of the approaching British frigates is Hillier himself, wanting to clear the situation up quickly so he can use those frigates for other things. So then are the first-rate ships Grandpa Buff? That's quite a possibility, the first rates are Grandpa Buff. I could imagine HMS Victory sounding like Grandpa Buff. Abzowski, what's the delay Dixon has between sending messages and actually receiving them? Not as long as people would like to think. He seems to again be using a very thorough and very speedy network of information going forward. But he also seems to take policy of... The interesting thing is, by the time Dixon receives the notes saying he has permission to dispatch ships to reinforce Hillier, Hillier's already fought the battle against Porter. And Dixon had already, of course, had dispatched those ships weeks earlier. My coach, hang on. Porter actually receives and acts on information. Yeah, this is why I have a feeling it was actually it was spoon-fed to him by someone. I'm not sure who, but, you know, they're trying. It's 2 to 3 weeks, or are a few months? It's 2 to 3 weeks. Maximum. there seems to be quite a lot of overland movement as well as a seaborne movement of trade information going. The ironclads would be the F-35, probably. Mark Anderson, I swear from Richard, it's Valparaíso or Montevideo. The more things change, the more they think the same. Anyway, so Porter decides that he must escape before the reinforcements arrive. I'm sure Hillier was massively disappointed by this fact. And so Hillier is told that on the 23rd of March, Porter is going to Sortie. Surprisingly enough, Hillier was already prepared for this. This is the thing. When the information comes in, and everyone's and you would expect him to be preparing, he seems to be so unsurprised and the ships are already prepared for it. Which is another reason why I have a strong suspicion, considering the sheer amount of information flow coming out to Hillier, that Hillier was the one who sent the information to Porter. Okay? There are people who say, well, there are people who are siding the Americans in the harbour. There might have been people siding the Americans. But I'm still fairly certain that the information that the British frigates were coming, and exactly what those frigates were, in terms of firepower, coming, and the fact it was going to basically treble the number of Phoebes sitting outside him, came directly from Hillier. I cannot prove it to any of you. I cannot prove it. But it is my very strong suspicion. And that would suggest that whilst Porter was playing drafts, Hillier was playing chess. 3D chess. It's fun. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another poll. And you can decide. Do we think it was the information came via Hillier's plants or Chileans sympathetic to Porter? And I would point out, for those keeping a score with Montevideo, you have to remember the reason the Grass Spey comes out and skulls itself is because, of course, it hears that Ark Royal, Renown, Barham are all getting close. I'm not going to say that the British repeat tactics which work, but and that's, of course, famously planted in the news by the British making a phone call, which is a subject in the movie. So, again, I'm not saying the British repeat stuff which works. This is why I love history. Everyone is always telling me history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And I go, yes, it doesn't repeat, it does rhyme. But in this case, the rhyme is pretty darn similar. Oh. So there are people actually thinking it was Chilean sympathetic to border. That's good. There are some kindly souls in the chat. I'm glad to hear there are kindly souls as well as cynical ones. It's always not. There's always good to have a balance of the two in the world. So anyway, I just voted no there. Well, basically, Porter receives information that some British frigates are approaching to reinforce the blockade, and so decides he has to go to sea to try and escape before they arrive. I'm asking the chat whether they think it was information planted by Commodore Hillier, who knew exactly where the British frigates were and what was coming, or if it was actually information given to Porter by Chileans sympathetic with him. Oh. It's the problem. And as I often say, in the War of 1812, you have the Americans doing a very plucky fight versus what was in that era the functional equivalent of a superpower in terms of naval capabilities. And it's a case of, we have got these wonderful heavy frigates. Yes, you have. We've got third rates, which are the basic, most common variant of our battleships, and they are just sitting off your harbour. Do you want to fight them? No! Martinus Jones. The United States takes Macedonian. Constitution takes Syria and Java. Great stuff, Britain, yes, but you didn't read the back half of the book. Take care, Palderasson. I hope Denmark's going well. It could have been no. Right, I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, we have a percent missing, but 82% Helios plants. Okay. So, now we get to the battle. Okay, this is the battle point. On the 27th of March, Porter decides to get smart. Can we all be mildly afraid at this point? He decides he's going to mislead Hillier. And he's going to mislead Hillier in a way which is worthy of Cunningham, really. He decides to send his purser on shore and to ensure that Hillier receives information of this. I'm sure Hillier received information of his plan to send his purser on shore to tell him that he would do this, let alone information the purser was ashore. Will I be using Porter as a case study? Potentially. Probably not. There are better American officers to use as case studies. And that night... And this is the night of the 27th. Porter sends Lieutenant Maury in one of Essex's boats, carrying blue lights and launching rockets. And he sends him out specifically to the leeward. This, he hopes, would draw Hillier to the leeward so that Essex would be able to escape to the windward at daybreak. Hillier spots the lights, decides there's no ship, or otherwise knows there's no ship because he has observers sitting ashore who would tell him if there was a ship, with maybe their own rockets. And so he sends both Phoebe and Cherub to windward of where Essex was moored. And this is considered to be anticipation of Porter's plans, but I'm fairly certain he knew Porter's plans by this point. I'm not sure how, but I think Hillier has directly tapped Porter's brain and is opening up going, What is he going to try next? Really? Okay. Let's have it. I voted for sympathetic Chileans and I hope the Brits didn't pull off the same trick so many times. Stafford, we're going to get into some discussions at some point about what the British did at various other harbours at various other instances during the Napoleonic Wars and afterwards. Also against various ships. I'm going to tell you this. The British not only pulled off the same trick twice, they possibly pulled off the same trick about 24 times. Okay, the fact is no one seemed to learn it. They keep pulling it off and people don't realise it and they're just going, well, at this point we're just pulling it off and you don't even realise we're doing it when we've done it so many times. Do none of you read a history book? I think the thing is, it's because it's quite so believable, the British, that they are that these things are coming, and in this case, the frigates are coming. It's genuine information. It's not a lie. And it's like Renown and Hark Royal were coming. It's not a lie to the Grass Bay. They're coming. They're just nowhere near where they are. Or rather, they're nowhere near where they think they are. Take care, Venom. I'm going, Hilly near the time and place the boat would drop off the man. Along with Sudi, where how much change he had in his pockets. And yeah, more than likely. It's getting embarrassing at this point. So, on the 28th, Porter is disappointed to find that Phoebe and Cherub were close to the weather point of the bay, wearing inside and out of the point. The wind decided to helpfully pick up from the south-southwest, and so Porter struck his royals and yards at 2:45 p.m. Again, perhaps another deception, but soon after this, Essex's cables parted and she made a break for the sea. Hillier immediately altered course to cut Porter off. And to add, and as you can see beautifully in this picture and why I picked it, a sudden squall, is what we're just going to describe it, made away with Essex's main topmast, which broke off at the lower cap. At this point, I'm starting to wonder if Hillier either had actual spies aboard Porter's ship doing his bidding, or alternatively, literally God and fate had decided that frankly Porter was annoying them and were intervening on Hillier's side. Because look what happened to this poor ship before it even got into combat. There are two men, Samuel Miller and Thomas Brown, are lost with that topmast. So when the main topmast goes away, Essex also loses two of its crew. It depends what time you're talking about. At one point, HMS Victory was actually the fastest ship of the line, but there are various other points at different things. It's interesting history at this point. So Hillier is chasing him at 15:10 hours, and the British ships are hoisting the St. George's flag, which is written on them the words of God and country, British sailors' best rights, and traders offend both. Again, Hillier is not a wordsmith, and I don't think he should pretend to be, and I really wish he hadn't tried to be. But it makes sense to him. Porter realises at this point he has no chances of escape. So he wears Essex to starboard, tries to cut away the wreckage, but realises he's unable to sail back into port, and so drops anchor in a small bay out of sight of the nearest Chilean fort. So basically he's trying to protect himself as much as he can. And this is at 15:45 hours. So maybe this is about an hour after he started sailing. He's already dropped anchor. and he's flying free ensigns. Free trade and sailors' rights from the foretop. God, our country and liberty, tyrants offend them from the mizzen top, and the US colours from the mizzen peak. At this point, there is a small problem. If he had managed to anchor inside of the range of Chilean cannon, and i.e. within sight of the nearest Chilean fort, Hillier would still have considered him within Chilean waters. But Porter hadn't. Not only had he failed in his escape attempt, not only had luck conspired against him, not only had Hillier read every manoeuvre, he now anchored himself in a place which was, as far as Hillier was concerned, and as far as international law at this time could argue, international waters. Adrian, how far was the victory? Yeah, we're talking she was still gaining when they were trying to run away for the frigates. No, usually smack talk on local chat and EVE Online. Oh, don't get me started on that one. There is a reason I gave up playing EVE a long while time ago. At this point, you have a small problem. Porter's entire advantage is close-range gunfire. If we go back to this thing, he's close range. But he's now anchored himself, so he has no chance to control the range, because he's anchored. And he's no longer in neutral waters. So basically, he's sitting like a sitting duck. And has to. Now, at 16:10 hours, Hillier signals Cherub to fight at anchor. Adding extra cables to the anchor length so that the ship could be worn around and broadside brought to bear, but so they wouldn't have to maneuver. His plan is literally to stand off and fire. Even more so, he wants the Cherub to stand away at a decent distance and fire, and basically hold the back so Essex can't try and sneak away. But he also, remember, the Essex is anchored, so he tries to bring Phoebe to the point at which her broadside is going to be able to bear on the Essex's stern. So Essex will not only be able to fire to engage her at the range she's going to be engaging from, but Phoebe's going to be firing from the stern of the ship. So basically, there are all sorts of phrases, which I'm not going to use with my little cousins watching, that can describe what Hillier is planning to use Phoebe to do to Essex and Porter. But basically, he is planning on smashing them from the rear. Or the stern, as is more normal in terms of naval phraseology. So we need to go back in time and make sure Hillier gets a good rider. Yeah, we need to go back in some time and get Hillier to have someone who's actually good at propaganda. Yeah. Essex Jr. isn't doing anything really at this point. Now, at 16:20 hours, at a half gunshot, or 250 yards away, Phoebe opens fire. Phoebe is basically starting to smash Essex's stern and starboard quarter. Cherub is firing on Essex's bow. The ranges are such that actually fire from Essex's 12-pounder chase guns wounded Commander Tucker of HMS Cherub. And that's why Cherub then decides to move alongside Phoebe. And Tucker remains on deck throughout the action. He's badly wounded, but he remains on deck. Surprise? Look, in nicest way, the only thing Porter might have been surprised, but no one else was surprised with what's going on in this battle. I mean, Is anyone really surprised what's going on in this battle? We're talking about a highly prepared force, which seems to have known exactly what moves he was going to make before he made them. Porter, at this point, attempts to spring rove his anchor and wear around so he could shoot. Unfortunately, those springs were shot away before they could be used. Damn annoying accurate gunnery from the British. Raking is probably cousin safe. Well, yes, raking is probably cousin safe. They are definitely. It is definitely planning to rake. Now, at this point, Essex's 32-pounders, were actually starting to have an effect on Phoebe. Porter might claim they're of no use, but they were actually close enough in range. Despite having started firing from well out of their range, they were now at this point in range enough that they were starting to inflict damage. And the first lieutenant of HMS Phoebe was actually wounded by splinters and mortally wounded. He would die later of his wounds. This means that Hillier decides to increase range to take advantage of his guns over the 32-pounder carronades. Remember again, he has the ability to dictate range, and he's doing it. At the same point, though, Essex was trying to fire various projectiles at Phoebe's topsails, and the sheets have been cut. The mainsail cut up, the jib and boom damaged, and foremain and mizzenmast stowed away. But they were soon out of carronade range, and whilst they continued on the fighting and continued on the firing, Hillier actually gets his crew to manage to mend the rigging and furl the mainsail. So that's this point. This is what they're doing. They are protecting themselves. They're fixing themselves while involved in the fight, because the carronades. That's the advantage of fighting a ship solely armed with carronades. You can go far enough away that you can just fix your ship. I think probably he tried to do that. I think he possibly had some of the springs. There's a discussion as whether he put the springs on the anchor line when he dropped them or was trying to do it. But the thing is, he'd only managed to drop that anchor not long before they started firing at him. So it might have been that some of the long-range shots stopped him actually being able to achieve it. There's some differences and disopinions on the exact timeline of the fight. Yeah, there are, before as people are starting in the discussion, there's always the discussions of whether the Constitution could fight HMS Victory. She couldn't. But there are, in certain weathers she might be able to run away from her, but in other weathers she wouldn't. And the thing is, Victory would not be alone. If you have a first rate there, she'll have some third rates with her as well. And the thing is, Constitution would be alone. And even if they were caught in a one-on-one fight, Constitution wouldn't want to do that fight. She wouldn't want to get into it. Victory has far too much firepower. It's just not a good scenario for them. And again, Victory has the height. She can literally fire down. She has the heavier cannon, and she has the height advantage. To use a phraseology which I already used in one of the recordings I've done for the Long Patrol, this was basically in a fight between a frigate and even a heavy frigate, like the Constitution or any of the really good American heavy frigates. It's basically this scenario. The heavy frigates are Anakin Skywalker, a really powerful Force user. The ship of the line is Obi-Wan Kenobi. We have the high ground. You attack us, we will slice you in half and send you into burning lava. Don't do it. Yeah, it was a sad day when they stopped giving out prize money for the Royal Navy. I mean, seriously, that changed the Navy more than anything else. Oh, it was terrible. At this point, Hillier starts coordinating his force again. He tries to tell Tucker to keep the Cherub underway instead of fighting an anchor, to keep organising the range. And, well, Hillier, once he's repaired his ship again, Hillier again sort of approaches Essex. He's using his 9-pounder chase guns and receiving steady fire from Essex at 17:35 hours. At this point, the wind died down. This was not good. And occasionally they were fighting in a completely dead calm. Hillier anchored at a range of roughly half a mile. And at this point, Phoebe's 18-pounders were very effective against Essex. And Essex's carronades were just dropping their balls into the water. Peter O'Connell, it seems hopeful at best. It's definitely something. I'm not sure why he did what he did. So honestly, just as I've said before, Porter does not seem to me to be the greatest strategic thinker. When the wind finally picked up again, Essex Porter cut his cable and tried to sail towards Phoebe to board her. So Hillier sets sail and avoids Essex. Remember, he's repaired his mast. He's still got full sails. Essex is down to about half its rig has gone, and it was a slower ship already to begin with. This is not a sensible scenario. Essex's rigging is getting completely shredded at this point, which made her almost impossible to control. And Phoebe just continues to dance around her. Hillier was actually ordering his crew to target the rigging and upper deck throughout the battle. The reason for this was he wanted to capture the ship. He wanted the prize. Again, how do Royal Navy captains and crews get rich? They either carry specie, i.e. silver, or they capture prizes. This meant that not only was their rigging getting damaged, but many of the guns aboard the Essex had been disabled. And at this point, a small pile of powder explodes near Essex's main hatch. And I do love the phrase. So, they had powder spilled near the main hatch, and it hadn't been cleared up straight away in the battle. This shows you that command control has started to break down aboard Essex. And then some people historians then write, morale is starting to be lost by the crew. No, command and control are broken down. The command structures on Essex are starting to fall apart. If they've got powder on the deck, think about this. If you have powder on the deck, the most dangerous thing you have aboard your ship, open and it's been spilled on the deck and no one's dealt with it, i.e. put water on it to damp it and stop it being explosive, or drop sand on it, or any of the options you have and should have in buckets sitting around on your deck, there is a problem going on with your crew at that point. There are NCOs not paying attention, let alone officers not paying attention. And that's because a large number of them are injured. At this point, Porter has another idea. Essex is going to be run ashore and blown up. This was as Chesapeake was what Lawrence had planned for Chesapeake, of course, when Shannon took her, but it was just as successful as then. Because the wind dies down and he's forced to surrender. There's no hope of them staying ashore. And for some reason his crew aren't exactly enamored with that as an idea. For some reason his crew aren't enamored with this as an idea. Pretty much a lot of the crew can't abandon the ship, and between 60 and 70 of the crew who are actually able to abandon ship took to the boats to shore and tried to run away. Some also swam and drowned, but most were collected by British boats. The British actually put down boats to collect the Americans drowning in the river, drowning in the water, and just went, you know, yeah, well, you're prisoners. Stop being idiots. So in the end, about 40 seemed to escape to land, but most of them were found by the Chilean authorities at one point or other. At 18-20 hours, roughly, Porter strikes his colours. The trouble is, he had so many banners, flags, and ensigns hoisted at the time, but he basically mean hoisted. It was a constant, I will hoist this banner and it will impress them and change the morale. I will hoist this and it will make them give in and surrender to me. I will hoist this and it will cause the British morale to collapse. The trouble is, he has so many flags hoisted, it actually takes 10 minutes for the British to realise he's surrendered. Just bear with us on that one. He's got so many flags up, the British take 10 minutes to go, oh, frigate, he's surrendered! At that point, they send a boat to secure the prize. Porter apparently openly wept while he offered his sword to Hillier. And don't worry though, by the following morning, Porter was trying to debate the specifics of the battle so he could avoid being court-martialed for the loss of Essex. That was his important thing. He was trying to debate it at one point with Hillier, who was honestly looking at him as if he was nuts. Because he accused Hillier of being a coward for not coming in closer at one point. No, the Royal Navy didn't stop it. The Royal Navy didn't stop issuing prize money till... Let's put it this way. There's prize money issued during World War II. So it's post-World War II, I think. There's the final decision about prize money. And please note this. You might have noticed I haven't mentioned Essex Jr. during this entire battle. That's because she was so weak, and the British knew she was so weak. They actually didn't engage her at all during the battle. At no point did the British bother to fire at her. They ignored her for the entire... She was there, firing away, and the British were just going, yeah, we don't care about you. Oh. Yeah, okay, so, yeah, just deal with that. There is a whole other ship in the American formation firing away, and the British are just going, good for you, mate, keep firing. You're not worth firing back at. Have fun. Yeah, aren't you pretty? And what I find strange is sometimes I see this battle compared to some of the great battles, you know, which the Shannon versus the Chesapeake. That is an absolutely roaring battle of American quality command. And then there's this. Jacob, if there was still prize money today, the Royal Navy would find a way to drag you as carrying a ball. Minister of Exercise. No, you don't get prize money. I think it has been ultimately better for our alliances and friendships that we no longer give the Royal Navy prize money, but it's been a lot less fun for the Royal Navy. Yeah. The British in World War II, there are numerous raids in World War II where the British basically make off with captured merchant ships. I would love to know what trash talk would have occurred in the Age of Sail if Universal Signal Systems existed. It could have been interesting. As it was, nah. They're fine without it, but oh my. Okay. Okay, maybe it's true. Is a one ship on one ship engagement or 2 versus 2 really a battle? A skirmish, maybe? It's considered a battle. In this period, it's definitely a battle. They are fighting to the end. Skirmishes are when both sides withdraw. A battle is, they keep going to the end. It's a battle. It doesn't matter if it's 1 ship on 1 or 2 on 2 or whatever. It's still a battle. Minus, rule 1 of combat, don't play the enemy's game, make him play yours. American, I can only call Porter a case of sour grapes. Honestly, he's managed to play the game so badly, it's just embarrassing. Just imagine if there was prize money during the Falklands War. Oh, good lord. What the Royal Navy would have done in the Falklands War if there was prize money. Okay, so of these, Phoebe suffered 4 killed, 7 wounded. Cherub had 1 killed and 3 wounded. Essex had 58 dead, 65 wounded. And of course, Essex Jr. had none dead or wounded because no one had bothered to fire on her. Phoebe had some holes below the waterline, as well as her rigging severely cut. But she'd repaired most of that during the battle. Essex had been hit by 200 shots, and her stern had been smashed in, a hole in her counter, her wheel and rudder damaged, all 3 masts damaged, the figurehead shot away, 15 guns disabled, and 55 of those dead personnel were gun crew, 60 of those wounded were gun crew, and the upper works and rigging were severely damaged, if not existent. There is a lot of fun to be had, but before we get into the full discussion of the battle, let's consider some of the aftermath. Now, after this, there is the full write-up of what Porter claims versus the reality. Porter claims after the battle that the British had violated neutrality, conducted themselves dishonourably and inhumanely, and plundered his personal property after the engagement. Not sure how much of his personal property still existed after the engagement, but we'll see that one. He also states that the Essex was lost simply due to a series of misfortunes, which he blames primarily on Paul Hamilton for the fact that she had a short-range carronade armament. Again, he was the one who brought a knife to a gunfight. Hello, Melanie. actually, I cannot believe he writes this, in his letter to Secretary Jones, who's at this point the Naval Secretary, the Secretary of the Navy, writes, "I hope, sir, that our conduct may prove satisfactory to our country." And he further on went on to claim that the United States could claim the Essex back from the British as part of this. Now, why does he get to write such a report? Well, because he does something pretty interesting from a ship of cartel. But let's just leave it one thing. She becomes HMS Essex, so you can see what happens. But, you know, as I said, yes, his claim about personal property, that literally his personal property was mostly to the stern of the ship. The stern of the ship was what was caved in by the fire from HMS Phoebe. That's not stealing. That's destroying. Now, the trouble is, and I'm going to get into this in a bit, moment he's in Valparaíso, he can't really go anywhere. And the interesting thing is Hillier's report for Porter. Hillier writes that Porter was good conduct and he surrendered only when all his other options were expended. He found aboard Essex that there was provisions for a 6-month cruise, and he moved all the ships into Valparaíso, transferred the prisoners to a Spanish prison hulk, and starts repairs on ships. On the 2nd of April, 1814, he starts repairs on Phoebe's waterline specifically. By the 13th of April, remember those ships which were coming imminently, so Porter needed to leave harbour. So we're talking 2 weeks later, Tagus and Nereus arrive. 2 weeks later, they arrive. That was the imminent arrival, which meant Porter had to get to sea. Quickly. Had to go out. On the 26th of April, the prisoners were transferred over to the Essex Junior, which was turned into a cartel ship and ferried away. That included Porter, by the way. And Hillier decided to reconcile the Peruvian and Chilean governments at this point. He decided to turn his hand to diplomacy, which the British had been turning to attention to as Napoleon was exiled and they didn't like Chile and Peru having a war with each other. The British liked the Chileans and the Peruvians getting along. It was better for trade. On the 21st of May, HMS Britain arrived at Valparaíso. So at this point, Hillier has four large frigates and Cherub under his command in the harbour, plus the Essex as well. On the 31st of May, Phoebe sails home for Britain. Now, Dixon received Hillier's victory news on the 20th of June. It had passed over the Andes officially. And at this point, Dixon confirms the Treaty of Clarke, which is the treaty which is agreed between the Royalist and Patriot forces of the Chilean War of Independence. It's amazing at this point. Dixon has all the treaty negotiated, then waits for the official news to come by the official transport of Hillier's victory to confirm it. So just to make sure to keep the Chileans on side for that one. And at this point, Britain, Tagus, and Cherub are ordered to remain in the South Pacific as protection for the whaling fleet. And news actually reaches London in August 1814. They hear of the victory. Now, here is the interesting thing for Porter. Essex Jr. encounters HMS Saturn. This is why she's here. This lovely third-rate 74-gun ship, 74-gun third-rate ship of the line, and while she's carrying the prisoners, and Saturn inspects Essex Jr. for the notes and finds the information order. While Essex Jr. is being inspected, Porter manages to get a boat off the ship. This is off the Essex Jr., which is sailing into America anyway, and manages to get into harbour. He escapes. At this point, American coastal batteries did open up on the ship, but, you know, that's life. Secretary Jones claims that Porter's returned in triumph with this final escape, rather than being dropped off. Remember, one of the reasons why Essex Jr. was there and had been sent there was to return the prisoners to America. So if he'd stayed aboard the ship, he'd have still got back to America. He is literally doing this for the status of saying he escaped the British. And the British are sort of watching it going, Secretary Jones claimed that he'd returned in triumph, of course, as I said, and he also claimed that the Saturn had violated the terms of Porter's parole, and therefore Porter and his crew should be free to serve, which made Cochrane absolutely furious. He'd wanted to keep Porter as a prisoner, mainly because he thought he might actually inspire stuff. He didn't. There's an interesting discussion of whether Cochrane believes Porter is a dangerous captain from the point of his ability as a captain, or dangerous from the ability of his point of view from his abilities as a rabble-rouser and propagandist. I think we'd all agree it's probably the latter, but he never quite clarifies that one. Now, the fun thing of this is that Porter is then going to be given command of the USS Columbia, which was the new 44-gun frigate. But the British burnt her before she was completed, and the war actually ended before Porter managed to get the chance to go to sea again. So, in the end, was it all worth it? Well, for that we have to look at this. Was it all worth it? Well, he claimed that he'd inflicted $2.5 million worth of damage and cost the British $6 million to counter his cruise. The trouble is, there's only one prize which actually makes it back to America. Only one prize. The rest all have various fates, as you can see. Green means they're captured by the British. Orange means their own crews decide to sail them to England rather than America. Blue means seized by the Chilean government. And purple means that they are burnt by the Americans. And as you can see, Atlantic only raises $25,000 when sold on the 26th of August. And she'd actually been recaptured by the British first and sent into as a cartel ship into New York. So she doesn't she doesn't actually even arrive as his prize. So that's a really confusing one. You could argue none of his prizes actually make it home to America. I'd also point out that the British had 100, as I've already mentioned, the British had over 100 frigates involved in the operation around America. At best, you could say he's taking the attention of 4 and a sloop. And honestly, they're doing other jobs while out there, and they're the ships which are already really supposed to be out there. So I don't think that's really having the effect. Although he was arguably the most successful frigate captain when it came to raiding of the war. But again, he's going after whaling ships. So, here's the thing. In the end, does it justify itself? Look, I know I made a lot of fun of Porter's strategic sense in this thing, and honestly, I would say he's completely outclassed by Hillier. But Hillier has a lot of experience, as I said. Hillier's promotion and getting that role, Hillier's been at sea as long as Porter's been alive. If Hillier hadn't outclassed him, there was a problem going on there. And I'm not just talking in experience terms. Hillier's been involved in wars for almost as long as Porter's been alive. To be alive that long and in command that long, you've got to be fairly good. And Hillier's been having an active career. There's also the fact that in real terms, Porter's not just up against the brain power of Hillier. He's also up against the brain power of Dixon and all the other nodes within the British Command and Control Network and Information Network. It's just what's going on. So Porter should have been outclassed. There's also the ship he's on, which frankly is not designed for fighting enemy warships. It's designed for ramping up merchant ships, and it can do that. It can romp through merchant ships. But really, she needed to be a partner with the Constitution. And the moment the US can't get their heavy frigates out, their proper heavy frigates out to sea, they have trouble. They have nothing they can send out there which can really take on these. And also, here's the thing. If Constitution had been there, had been part of this force, if it had been Bainbridge and Constitution in command of Porter and they'd been out there, what is the betting that Dixon would have brought Montague to the fight? That's the thing we honestly have to think about. If Bainbridge and Constitution are there, is Dixon with Montague there? Is there a third rate there? Because that seems to be the British habit. What are the British doing? When the Americans turn up, the British turn up with overwhelming firepower. They brought Cherub and they brought Phoebe. And they've got more coming. They don't need them, but they've got more coming. And the whole real problem with this is, yes, it's a great and glorious charge, but it's going after the whaling fleet. And let's be honest, if he'd gone after the silver ships, he wouldn't have probably succeeded because they are actually proper frigates at this point, and his ship's not armed to fight them, so he wouldn't have won. But going for a silver ship, that is going to cause the headlines. When you're doing surface raiding, you're after the psychology of your impact. And whilst whalers are important, and yes, whale oil is critical for many things, there are lots of them, and which is going to make the sexier headlines? A single silver ship or 14 whalers? Jack Ray, why do we name several US ships after border officers? Yes, they are for him and his son, but still. Well, the thing is, you have to remember the ships that... Because he'd done all this, because the Americans need a hero. In the War of 1812, they need a hero. Remember, they start this grand war with these grand plans and everything keeps failing. All their grand plans keep failing. They need a hero. He gets home. He's pushes himself to be marketed as a hero. He's marketed as a hero. In reality, as said, look at the results. Is that really causing the British a lot of trouble? Realistically, what is lost to them? Realistically, they lose 5 whalers, of which one of those whalers is actually recaptured by the British and then sent as a cartel ship. And when he's aboard the Essex Junior, she's theoretically functioning as a cartel. She's functioning as a cartel ship. It's just not good. Now, his son is better. Please don't get me wrong on that one. And Porter does himself end up as the admiral in charge of the Mexican Navy at one point. He also resigns from the U.S. Navy in 1826 before he becomes the commander-in-chief of the Mexican Navy. This is because of some issues he has done already. He turns out to not be necessarily the best officer to have. Whilst he's trying to suppress piracy, he invades Puerto Rico in order to avenge the jailing officer of his fleet without permission from the US government. It's a problem, really, with Porter. Because in many ways, he actually does a lot of good for the US Navy. He is very good at promoting the US Navy. He is... he does a lot of good work promoting and pushing the US Navy forward. But as a commander, he has a habit of acting without thinking. Let's put it this way. He markets himself and honestly believes it's a good thing, and some people actually agree it's a good thing, that he was sailing to Valparaíso to challenge the Phoebe and Cherub to a duel, to go and fight them. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if that had been the case at Montevideo? If her captain, Hans Langsdorff, had announced to his officers, I am planning to go and challenge the South Atlantic Squadron. I'm going to take on the South America Squadron. I'm going to go and take on Harwood's force. His officers would have called him insane. They'd have removed him from command. That's not what you do as a surface raider. So, is he really thinking it's sensible to sail and challenge 2 fully worked up warships to a fight? And then you consider the actions while he's in Valparaíso. He arrives there before the warship, so he's surprised when they arrive. And he actually is. This is the other thing. If you're sailing there to challenge them, why is he surprised when they arrive? Why? And where's he got the information that they exist from? There's no intelligence network feeding him. He's off in islands in the Pacific getting no information from anywhere else. So why is he sailing there? Is he sailing there with the hope that they are going to be there? That they're going to come to him there? And then his actions in the harbour, burning the Hector. All these other things. That's just... He doesn't think through what he's going to do. Jack Ray. Oh, good lord, that's saying something. Thing. I don't think he could have led a fleet as well as Beatty. It's a tough one. It's really a tough one because there is part of me which looks at his going out voyaging. It's a great demonstration of America reaching for the rest of the world, and part of the reason why American Navy has emerged as their tool of foreign policy, and how the Americans actually developed an interest in going out to the wide world, was Porter's voyages, was a demonstration of the impact and the effect they could have on the world in their view. But the reality of it is so different from the myth of it. My coach, when did he burn Hector? What is it? I think when he burnt the Hector, he was just burning it. He wasn't thinking it through. He couldn't crew it. He didn't want to leave it for it to be taken over by the British in harbour or the Chilean authorities. Giving it to the Chilean authorities would have been a sensible thing. Instead, he burns it so that no one else can have it. It's the act of a petulant child in some regards. In fact, a lot of this is the act of a petulant child. Now, you could say maybe it's the stress of command that's wearing on him, but seriously. At this point, he has had a fairly good war. He was the one who defeated HMS Active. I think was it Active? I forget the name of the ship he defeated. Was it Active? I know it was an A name. I know I said it not that long ago, and my brain... Alert! HMS Alert, not HMS Active. You know, he'd fought another war. He'd fought a warship. Yes, she's a baby warship. But he had that. You expect something from an officer who's got that behind him, who's got the fighting pedigree behind him. And yet, in this scenario, as I've alluded to at several points, honestly, Hillier is playing him like a fiddle. Thank you, Jack Ray. Someone who's unnamed was gifted a membership by Jack Ray. Thank you. And Jonathan Barrow and Sean Brennan. So, yeah. So, I'm going to say any questions, and I'm going to do questions for about 20 minutes, then I'm going to take a comfort break, and then I'm going to appear on Discord. I've never seen... I don't know what's happened. Who's it given it to? If it's given membership to no name, I don't know. I don't know what's happened with that one. Thanks for memberships, but I honestly don't know what's happened with that one. Sorry, a comment's just flocked up going, actually, a camel might have a decent chance against a raptor. Can't jam the Mark 1 eyeball. The raptors can only carry so many AMRAAMs. Honestly, I think the raptor would have to close with gun range for a camel, but leave that to one side. Not me, honestly. Ay, caramba. So, yeah, It's an interesting... It's an interesting course of events, an interesting story, but I honestly... Yeah. This is one of those things where the myth has certainly completely overwhelmed the actual history. Literally no one before me. I don't know why, Melanie. I don't know why. The symbol is the name. Listen, should the Japanese have used the 25mm Type 96A gun to replace the... do they have... The question is, do they have the infrastructure and ability to use that? The answer probably is yes, they should have tried, but could they? 10 oh, thanks for an excellent lecture, Doc. I've learned much and built a small brewery. Cool. O scale. Porter seemed to be promoted quickly. Did he have patronage? Honestly, he's very good at making connections. I remember he served on the John Rogers in his first ship during the as a midshipman. Connections. Well, he basically seems to be in the right place at the right time and prepared to promote himself quite well. But yeah, he's it's an interesting history. He certainly makes more connections for his son and for Farragut. And that he does do. He managed to get Paul Hamilton and others. And that's one of the things I find so much fun, because he blames everything on Paul Hamilton. And yet Paul Hamilton was his friend, who he'd managed to get to appoint James, who of course becomes David Glasgow Farragut, as a midshipman as soon as he could be. Which is one of the reasons why Farragut goes to sea with Porter in 1810. 6 months actually before he's 10 years old. And Dr. 95, how would the HMS Indefatigable do against the US Constitution? It would be a hard fight, but I have a feeling Indefatigable might actually win versus the Ironsides. Might. She has slightly thicker timbers, and the guns are about equal with each other. So Indefatigable possibly could win, but it's going to depend to extent on the commanders. If considering who Indefatigable usually has in charge, probably Indefatigable again. But Bainbridge was a darn good commander, and if anyone's going to pull something out of the hat, it will be Bainbridge. Come on, if one can stick an sidewinder into a balloon, the engine of the Camel is a better heat signature. Probably. As long as it's running. Remember, the Camel's engine wasn't always the most reliable thing in the world. Nice to hear everyone. No, it's not. Is it fair to call the Baltic Plan an inevitable disaster? No. It actually could have worked. If it was done quick enough. And done right. Which, with Fisher around, I have doubts about, because, honestly, the one weakness Fisher seems to have is in amphibious operations. I've encountered from habitual line cross videos that the fairy swordfish is the kindly old man, up until someone mocks it for being a biplane, at which point it goes full psychopath and gets scary. Yeah. Kind of like, imagine the Buff character when the Buff hears that the F-22 has been shot down and goes, oh good, time to glass the Middle East. It's just that sort of scenario. They're given at random, I think, but I think you have to have some settings set up to enable memberships to be given to you. There was a midshipman aboard the Phoebe, Alan Gardner, who returned to Chile in 1942. Yeah. No, Jack does like Melanie. Right. So, before I go, as said, it's now about 10:30, and I'm going to go comfort break, and then I'll appear on Discord for anyone who wants further chats, and the link to Discord is down below. What have we got coming up this week? This week we have the first carriers, conversions, and scratch builds. I hope you enjoyed the Kaiserlich Marines carriers. I thought that was a rather fun one. And it had a rather fun question in, because it honestly is the scenario of if Germany had built a full-length cruiser, a full-length flight deck carrier in time for the Battle of Jutland, which they could have done, I can guarantee the British would have had a couple available. And that could have really changed Jutland. Why did the Japanese try to replace the medium 40mm Type 91 pop bomb air gun and light 7.7 with the light 25mm Type 96 air gun? It's due to logistics and infrastructure and what they can supply and support. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you Michael Cooch, Jack Ray, Raptorat, John Shea, thank you Melanie1640, thank you Alvin Gasberg, thank you Abzalski, thank you everyone who's been watching, Blackburn Maximus, everyone who's been a member, everyone who's live, who's chatted. Thank you everyone. As said many times, this channel wouldn't be where it is without your support, so if you do like it, please do like. Maybe consider subscribing, which I believe the buttons are down here somewhere. I'm not like Sal, I can't point directly and hit them. I don't know, that they're somewhere around here. Somewhere. And if you want to support the channel, or basically my book addiction, Patreon and Ko-fi are up there, and there's also membership on the channel, which, honestly, thank you. The memberships mean a lot, because I think the things which really help the algorithm and promotion are interactions with the videos. So that will promote the individual video. So liking, sharing, commenting, all those things promote a video individually. But becoming a member of the channel, engaging with the community page, which you can find a link to through the cover, the front page of the channel, etc., the channel page. Those things all promote the channel. And yeah, they seem to be good things. Thank you very much everyone who does help, and thank you everyone who supports the channel. Seriously, I'd run out of Iron Brew and books without you all. And that would be terrible. Thank you, Nordic Wolf. Thank you, Duckland95. Thank you, Sen Penguins. Thank you, Renan, DG40. Thank you, everyone. I was asking, nights ago, I should have 70 questions by Sunday. Well, that'll be fun. Please note, I'm spending Friday putting stuff in boxes. And a lot of Saturday putting stuff in boxes. So, yay. It's going to be fun. Thank you, Paul Amos. Thank you, everyone. And hope to see some of you on, if not all of you, if you want to, on Discord in a bit. Take care and chat soon.